The following program contains material of an enlightening nature. Open-mindedness is advised.
Today, I want you to open your mind.
I've almost come to the conclusion that the story is so damning that the mass of people can't deal with it.
We are in process of developing a whole series of techniques to get people actually to love their servitude.
We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
To change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people of the world, and especially the United States, to bring about one world socialist totalitarian government.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
As you connect the dots between different people, organizations, places, religions, history, suddenly the picture starts to form. You don't connect the dots. It's just a mass of what's all this about.
The kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure.
Someone born in the United States is not more special than someone born in Mexico. Someone who is white is not more special than someone who is black. They're just vehicles for the consciousness to experience.
Brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people.
War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength.
Humans as a species are prone to amnesia. Those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat it. It is thus imperative that these all-important matters be thoroughly explored and not left up to blind faith.
It's about time some of you got acquainted with the real hard truth.
What you are now experiencing is the vibration of air particles being transformed into electrical signals by your senses and DNA, then sent to the brain where they are decoded into sounds that we define by letters and numbers, which at their core are symbols. I'm your host, Ryan Gable, and you are listening to The Secret Teachings, our website, www.thesecretteachings.info. That's www.thesecretteachings.info. If you go over to the website, you'll find a top news tab with all of the current events that I've put up on the website. You can click those links. It'll take you right to the news site where I found that information, and there's a lot of news stories that are up on the website that we might not get a chance to cover on this week's show, and there's a lot there that, stuff that we do cover on the show. So if anything that we talk about on the show is interesting enough that you want to go check it out for yourself, read the entire article. It is available at thesecretteachings.info. You'll also find the show archive, which is free to access. That means that you can download any of our past episodes for free. If you've never really listened to The Secret Teachings before, or you're just kind of getting into the swing of things and how we do it here, it is a much different radio show than most radio shows. We cover pretty much any topic. I don't think anything's really off topics, with the exception of a few things that might not necessarily, in terms of entertainment value, like Hollywood and the celebrity. We really don't get into that. Although once in a while we'll talk about, mass mind control in movies and television and music and things of that nature. So we cover just about everything here on The Secret Teachings, and there's a lot of good stuff in the news this week that we'll get into. Again, all of that is available at the website, so you can check out those news articles and all of our past episodes for free. I know a lot of you probably are aware that I have been traveling the last couple of weeks, and I've moved across the country from Florida through Louisiana to Texas, through Nevada, and all the way up to the West Coast, the Northwest. So I missed a week last week, and, in fact, since I pre-record the show a week ahead of time, I've actually missed basically 2 weeks of recording. So it's kind of good to get back in the swing of things. I've got the new board out, and I've got everything kind of set up a little bit differently. So maybe it's just me. Maybe my ears were clogged, and they kind of have popped on my travels across the country. But it seems like the microphone sounds a little bit different. It sounds a little deeper. But regardless, I really like the sound, and I think the sound quality is really, really good for the equipment that we have. On the show last week was a repeat, but the week before that we had Joseph P. Farrell And I got to say, I was really surprised for a show that I did not do much promoting for because I was traveling. We sure got a lot of downloads and a lot of listens to that show. So the Joseph P. Farrell Show is available at thesecretteachings.info. You can download it for free, or you can stream it for free right off of the website, take you to the archive page as well. This week on the show, we were going to be talking again with Robert Sullivan, who is the author of Cinema Symbolism. Remember, we had Robert Sullivan on the show last year, I think. Let me think for a second. I got it right here. It's May, June, July 26th of last year, we had 32nd degree Mason Robert Sullivan IV on the show to discuss his work, The Royal Arch of Enoch, the Impact of Masonic Ritual. And then today we're going to be speaking more so about cinema symbolism. We'll also talk current events in the second half of today's show. Next week I'm going to be discussing my cross-country road trip, if you will, my moving across country, what I dealt with along the way, including border security, some interesting stories about border security down on the border near Mexico, as well as my trip through Nevada. And you might have seen some of these photographs. I have them on the website of Nellis Air Force Base, Rachel, Nevada, which is very popular and famous, especially if you're used to or know a little bit about Area 51 and the lore around that. And we're going to be talking about Area 51 and Dreamland next week, as well as some additional current events. So this week, Robert Sullivan, the author of Cinema Symbolism. Next week, we're going to be talking about my cross-country trip, specifically focusing on Area 51, Nellis Air Force Base, and all of the lore that's associated with that, and also some additional military bases that might actually be more of a haven for human alien activity, as I personally believe Area 51 is kind of used as a social cultural, pop culture distraction from where the real, if you want to say reverse engineering, but where the real meat of the matter is in terms of ufology and extraterrestrials. Some other news before we bring Robert onto the show today. I've completed my second book. So if you've read The Grand Illusion, Slaves to Perception, that book's about 740 pages, even though it's 13 chapters, but I discussed, everything in that book, from the nature of reality to geoengineering to symbols to pop culture, like movies and music videos, like I mentioned a moment ago, which is something we're actually going to be speaking with Robert about today in terms of symbolism in cinema. As the book is called A Guide to Esoteric Imagery in Popular Movies. So I covered all that in the book. My new book, though, is called False Prophets and the Lovers of Children, and it is actually, the subtitle is Lawful Ways to Disestablish the Establishment. I've got the thing, I've got the front cover, the back cover finished, I've got the actual text of the book finished. I'm just kind of touching up a few things here and there, and then I'll probably be releasing it sometime in the next couple of months. It's only about 200 pages, so it's much smaller, but the details of it dive into this international network, child trafficking, drug trafficking, baby trafficking, all the little details and things that we're not really supposed to talk about here on the radio are all discussed in that book. And I've got the news articles, I've got court documents, everything in there that we were told we weren't supposed to talk about when we were over at Dark Matter. Other people on other networks told us they're uncomfortable with us speaking about this. I'm always telling Michael that I'm very happy that he just doesn't care what we speak about on L&M, as long as it has substance and there's truth to it. So we always give a thanks to Michael for letting us do that here on L&M, because there's another big story in the news out of the UK about a VIP pedophile network. So one of the reasons I cover that so much, if you maybe you just started listening to the show and that's all you've really heard in the last couple of weeks, is because I think it's so important, specifically because that's the one topic where there's like documented proof and thousands of witnesses, and yet people just want to ignore it. They don't want to talk about it. Well, I think it's important to talk about, because if it's going to be covered up by people who even know that it's true and they still don't want to talk about it, there's like another lore to that. There's something really, really fishy about that situation. And speaking of fish, let's not be led astray by the red herring. I think fish, by the red herring that can be, radio shows or movies or television that claim that they know the truth about, let's say, child trafficking, or let's say human trafficking, or Area 51, for example, and yet they lead you astray with distractions and tic-tac topics and debates, arguments that don't really mean anything at all. Here I try to bring you the raw, unfiltered truth in its the purest form. so much as I can determine, at least from my research. So that book is False Prophets and the Lovers of Children. That'll be available soon. The cover of it is available. You want to check it out. It'll be up at thesecretteachings.info as well as facebook.com/thesecretteachings. Also, for the show, we're going to be airing a Blast from the Past episode of The Secret Teachings, I believe, starting on Saturdays on the L&M Radio Network. Michael said that we're going to have an open slot on Saturday, so it'll be a Blast from the Past episode, and then Sundays at 7 p.m. my time, because I moved, but it'll be still the old 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Secret Teachings will air brand new every Sunday on the L&M Radio Network. Of course, the Last Frequency, Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Michael and I host the Last Frequency. And then I had a little bit of a mishap today in communications, because I'm recording on a Sunday, a week before this show will air. But I am going to be co-hosting Radio Free Kannada with Kevin Annette every Sunday at 4 p.m., I believe, or 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that'll also be something to look forward to. And again, you know, I hate always referring people to the website, because I don't like when companies and you know, people just constantly do that. You want to see my work? Well, here, go to the website. You want to fill out this form? Go to the website. But that's where all the information is. It's www.thesecretteachings.info. I have one quick article here, then we'll take a short break, come back with Robert Sullivan and Mike D., who will be joining us on the line here in a moment. But I picked this news article up on my trip across country. I picked up one of those Natural Awakening magazines, and I found this. It says, world authorities recognize danger of cell phone radiation. Now, see, I found this interesting because I was told, and we were told, by major media outlets and cell phone companies who said that they conducted their own tests, that there was no effects, dangerous effects rather, of cell phone radiation. Well, in fact, that's a lie. In 2011, the World Health Organization actually recognized that cell phones and other types of wireless technology, including Wi-Fi signals and stuff like that, are dangerous for humans, that they can cause tumors, that they can cause cancer. The Environmental Working Group, the EWG, published a study in 2013 that states that all electronic appliances, no matter what they are, emit a type of non-ionizing radiation that does, in fact, harm soft tissue in the body and can cause things such as hypersensitivity, like electronic hypersensitivity. That is a type of illness now. They call it electrical hypersensitivity. So in terms of all of that, this article just in very brief sentences and very brief paragraphs explains all of that and says that, you know, it kind of goes into the ways in which you can protect yourself from that radiation. But the thing is, you know, whether you're using Wi-Fi is like constantly around us now, no matter where we go. It's in McDonald's, it's Starbucks, it's in your apartment complex, it's, you know, it's in your church, it's everywhere. You just like there's no way to get away from it. And you got companies like Google who now they want to do like global Wi-Fi, where they've got satellites orbiting the Earth, and just everybody has internet access, and there's just this constant stream of digital information above us at all times. So with that, plus these menacing-looking, like 50-story cell phone towers that look like something out of just a horror movie, like an Alfred Hitchcock movie or something, these things are all over the place, and they put a lot of them near college campuses. You know, how are kids supposed to pass tests? How are you supposed to get sleep when you're being bombarded by that much radiation and by that much interference with your brainwaves? I mean, the human body is a bioelectrical chemical computer system, and when it has that type of interference, I mean, how is it supposed to function properly? It's just like here on the radio. If I take these two cords I have sitting next to me on the board, I rub them together, the electrical current that's running through them, it'll cause a static to go off. And I might not hear it in my headphones, but you'll hear it in the recording. So it's the same thing with cell phone towers and the interference in the human body. I just don't see how it takes so long for the WHO, the WHO, and groups like the EWG, after years and years and years and years of cell phone usage, how it takes them so long to finally recognize that it's a problem. I mean, they just rely on the cell phone companies to say, they'll ask them, did you do the study? And the companies say, yeah, we did the study. Well, what'd you find? Well, nothing. Well, there's no harm done by radiation or cell phones or wireless devices. And then the regulatory bodies say, okay. Not that they even ask for the study. They just say, did you do it? Yeah, we did it. Okay, that's the end of it. And then they say that it's okay. And then they put that information out to the media, who then just blows it up. And then if you say, hey, look, cell phones cause tumors and cell phones can cause cancer. Not that it's a direct cause of, but that it can cause cancer, that it's a major contributing factor to increases in cancer. And you say that, well, you're wrong because the media said it's not, the cell phone company said it's not, and the regulatory agencies said it's not. But all of that's based on a simple lie and this believability, or this romanticizing that we can just believe that everybody's telling the truth when they're not. It's just a bunch of liars, crooks, and thieves trying to meet the bottom line and to make another dollar. It just makes me sick and tired of the way in which this society is established in terms of finances and economics and things like that. It just makes me very, very upset. But anyway, today on the show, Robert Sullivan, the fourth author of Cinema Symbolism, an esoteric guide, a guide to esoteric imagery in popular movies, coming up here in just a moment. Don't forget the website, www.thesecretteachings.info. That's www.thesecretteachings.info. And also on the website at the top right, if you'd like to help support The Secret Teachings, there is a donate button at the very top right. Any donations over, I think it was, $15, and I'll send you a PDF copy of The Grand Illusion, Slaves to Perception, my first book, and hopefully in the next couple of months here we'll get the second book out, False Prophets and the Lovers of Children. Robert Sullivan, the fourth, coming up right here on The Secret Teachings with Mike D. We'll be right back.
Are you tired of shows about bogus photographs of guinea pigs on Mars or fake photos of Bigfoot in the woods? How about fake paranormal shows that don't actually discuss the paranormal or believe that every object they see in the sky must be extraterrestrial? How about big networks that use alternative news to promote their mainstream agenda, political shows that are one-sided, or shows that claim to know exactly what is happening for ratings, even though an event just broke in the news? Me too. At The Secret Teachings, we are not like any of those other shows. We cover any topic from symbolism to ancient history and from health to the occult, including the paranormal, but we don't just jump on board with every photograph of an orb or sample of Bigfoot hair. We have no political affiliations, no religious backing, and no financial backing. We want proof, and not someone's word. If you want proof, or at least a different perspective from a host that can both accept or deny all points of view and all pieces of evidence, without holding onto a preconditioned belief or looking for evidence to support a prior conclusion, someone who can even admit when they're wrong, then check out The Secret Teachings radio show. Airtimes and free downloads are available by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. That's thesecretteachings.info. I'm your host, Ryan Gable, and I hope that you will join us. Namaste.
Hi, this is Joseph P. Farrell. I'm the author of Roswell and the Reich, SS Brotherhood of the Bell, and a number of other books. My website is www.gizadeathstar.com, and you're listening to The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable.
This is Robert W. Sullivan IV, author of The Royal Arch of Enoch and Cinema Symbolism, and you're listening to The Secret Teachings.
and welcome back to The Secret Teachings. I'm your host, Ryan Gable. The website, www.thesecretteachings.info. That's www.thesecretteachings.info. The song that you're listening to right now is by Emancipator called Jetstream. All of the information for The Secret Teachings, including current events and all of our past episodes that you can download or stream for free, are available at thesecretteachings.info under the Show Archive tab and the Top News tab. The guest that we have on today, Robert Sullivan IV, joined us last year, and that episode where he joined us, we talked about his first book. We talked about the Royal Arch of Enoch. That is available to download or to listen for free at thesecretteachings.info. Mr. Sullivan is a Freemason who joined the Amicable St. John's Lodge number 25 in Baltimore, Maryland in 1997. He is a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason. He's written books such as The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy and Symbolism in 2012. It was his first published work, and that's what we discussed the first time we had him on the show. We briefly got into cinema symbolism, which is the main topic of today's show. The book is Cinema Symbolism, A Guide to Esoteric Imagery in Popular Movies. I have both Robert Sullivan IV and my co-host Mike D. on the line with me. How are you both doing today?
I'm fine. Thank you, Ryan, for having me back on The Secret Teachings. It's great to be with you.
Absolutely. Mike D., are you with us?
I'm here, yes, sir.
All right, great.
Glad to be here also.
All right. So, Robert, I think most of the listeners remember who you are. You've been on a lot of shows that are kind of intertwined with what our show does. I read a little bit of the bio. Your bio is also up on our website, but if you'd like to maybe start out, give us a little bit more of a background and what kind of led you to write Cinema Symbolism.
Sure, absolutely, guys. Again, thanks for having me on The Secret Teachings. As you said, last year I was on for the Royal Arch of Enoch, and that book was really a product of 20 years of research and writing. And don't want to go back too far, but just to give some background, this was a book that began when I was an associate student back at Oxford University in 1992-93. I just began just as a side project, investigating and researching, for lack of a better word, the Hermetic tradition, its influence on material culture, mysticism, the occult, alchemy, things of this nature, secret societies. It's just something that was I was introduced to it over there, not through a course study. I was taking courses, but this was just more of an interest that developed. And it's something I'd always been interested in, but I was really able to cultivate it over there. But anyway, I came back to the States, and I became a Freemason, as you said, and I really started writing this book in earnest in the 2000s. And this is the Royal Arch of Enoch book I'm talking about. And again, I'm not going to go. We've done an hour or whatever was the last time on this book, but it was about esoteric Freemasonry, this high degree ritual, the Royal Arch of Enoch. The symbolisms, the philosophies, its influence on the United States as a whole, the Masonic, influence on the creation of the United States, the symbology, things like that. And when I was writing Royal Arch of Enoch, I wanted to bring it up to really modern day. So the final chapter of the Royal Arch of Enoch delved into what I would call Masonic, solar, and Enochian sort of themes in popular movies that I'd seen and were clearly there, and I could clearly document them. This covered movies such as the National Treasure films, Da Vinci Code, Being There, Excalibur, which is a giant solar allegory. But as I was doing this, and again, this is in the in the 2010 to 2012 time frame, I would say, I started noticing these same sort of themes, in mythology and numerology turning up in other movies. And they weren't necessarily Masonic per se, but it interested me, and it just always fascinated me, seeing the sort of veiled symbolism going on in popular movies. So I wanted to talk more about this, but obviously I couldn't have had this chapter in the Royal Arch go on forever. So I closed Royal Arch of Enoch out, and again, it's the final chapter of the Royal Arch of Enoch book. The chapter is called So Dark the Con of Man, which comes out of Da Vinci Code. But immediately when Royal Arch was published and after it came out, I started on the cinema book. I started writing it immediately, actually. In fact, as Royal Arch was concluding and wrapping up, I had already started outlining and new movies that I wanted to go into and things like that. So when after Royal Arch came out, I immediately started going into this second book, the Cinema Symbolism book, and that came out, back in, late summer 2014 last year. And I'm real happy with the way it came out. And like I said, it's sort of what I would kind of call a continuation of the final chapter of the Royal Arch of Enoch, just going into other subject matters. But it's a subject that has always interested me. And, I was real happy that I was able to pin it down and, document it and, really try to present it in a scholarly way. So Cinema Symbolism came out, and I'm really pleased with it, and I can report that I'm currently working on its sequel, Cinema Symbolism 2, which is even going to go into more movies.
Yeah, I feel like you might be able to do a third and a fourth and a fifth one because, just watching some of the movies I've seen recently, and I'm not a Freemason, I'm not a member of the Scottish Rite, I'm not anything other than a researcher who has avidly just delved into the symbolism and into Masonic lore and into a whole bunch of aspects of our history in the past 5, 6, 7 years of my journey in radio. And in the book, and the second book I've written now, it's be coming out towards the middle of this year. And, I can watch a movie or a television show and just say, wow, how do other people not pick this up? I mean, I'm sure for you it's 10 times that. And I know Mike D., he kind of sees the same thing because of what he studies. How do you just how do you put everything into perspective when you watch a movie? Do you choose a movie, watch it, and look for symbols? Or do you just, you're randomly flipping through the channels one day, you see a movie, and then bam, all of this stuff starts coming at you?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. It's really a good way to put it. When I was doing Royal Arch, I mean, basically, for the best way for me to describe it is, and you're absolutely right, is the Royal Arch of Enoch book was sort of the result of 20 years of research, and what I did was I just turned it on Hollywood. But I've had it happen both ways. I've watched movies and have picked up on it. I've watched movies and not expecting to see something, and there it is. I've watched, I've had the opposite happen. I've watched things and expected to see something and saw nothing. But yeah, I mean, it's one of, and it's sort of, these movies come at you with different sort of angles. Some are alchemical, some deal with mythology, some deal with Kabbalah, some are archetypical. So, it's a whole bailiwick of, and some crisscross. I mean, you'll find, a mixture of this, and, some of it comes out of folklore, and Gnosticism and astrology and ancient religions, and, retelling of stories, just with new faces on them, or new characters, essentially. So, it's really a real plethora of ways to do it and to look at it. But, I have seen, there are some tip-offs to this stuff when I'm watching it. They kind of clue me in. It's the plot of the movie also. I mean, if it's a movie that deals, with like a hero's journey or the monomyth, you can obviously look for that. If you're dealing with a movie that's somewhat alchemical or a transition of the self type movie, certain things will turn up. So, it's really a lot of different ways to kind of clue in on this stuff. And, and you're right. I mean, I haven't a lot of the movies I'm doing right now are kind of movies that have come out, I haven't seen anything of late. Probably with I just haven't watched anything that's really come out in the last 6 or 8 months. But I've just been going back and just going over some of these movies where you'll find it. I mean, you'll just see this stuff, and it's the filmmaker, the directors placing stuff in films to convey a message to the subconscious. Or even in some instances, it's very more blatant, like you said, where you can definitely see what the filmmaker is going for. It's definitely more, out in the open. But alternatively, I've watched movies and been really, where I kind of was expecting maybe this will have something, and nothing was there. So it's a challenge, and it's something I love doing. And when I do this, I just mentioned this on another show I was on, I always live by the mantra of when in doubt, throw it out. So if I'm not sure of something, and unless I can really pin it down, that's when it gets into the book. If it's something that's sort of wishy-washy or I'm not sure about, then or I'm not happy that I can fully substantiate it, I really only go for the jugular of stuff I can really pin down. And like I said, you're right. I mean, it's a lot of it out there. Cinema Symbolism. When I was writing that, There were more movies I wanted to talk about, and I thought, oh my goodness, this book will just go on and on forever. So yeah, I mean, literally. So I stopped writing, and I thought, okay, well, I'll do the C.S. Lewis material and the Harry Potter material. I'll put that in cinema symbolism too, and it's something I'm working on right now.
Well, I think maybe that's a good place to start. I want to get into maybe let's do Harry Potter first for I think the listeners. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you, in terms of the symbolism that we'll probably be discussing here in just a moment. What do you think? Do you think that it's placed there? Is it something that just like it comes from, whether it's ancient religion, whether it's mythology, whatever the case may be? Those are products of man's imagination, man's representation of certain things through symbols, and that just kind of transitions and shows how modern man, at least subconsciously, is very, very much like ancient man. Or do you see that there are certain directors, certain producers who understand those symbols, understand that information, and they specifically, purposely put it into the movie, into the film, to influence the subconscious mind, whether that's to attract more people to the film subconsciously, whether it's to make more money, or it's there to promote some other type of agenda?
I think it's a combination of both. I think a lot of times these guys are clearly aware of this material and are placing it there intentionally, to draw on this ancient mythology,
I would think, I was going to say, I don't mean to interrupt you, but after what I've studied and I've seen, it becomes to a point with music videos, movies, and TV. The people that are doing these, they almost have to have an idea of what's going on. Otherwise, they could not just accidentally place those same symbols and same stories in all of these different films.
Oh no, I've seen enough to convince me that this stuff is clearly intentionally placed. Stuff that is very subtle, stuff that is very difficult to pick up on. I think of some of the stuff with Aronofsky and Black Swan. Just not to digress too much, but that was a movie I took on in cinema symbolism, and there's a whole nother story going on in that it was overwhelming, and I had to actually excise that portion out, and I'm writing that in cinema symbolism. And there were things I'd missed. I watched Black Swan a few times, or more than a few times, when I was doing the first movie book, or the one that I'm on here talking to you about. And like I said, there's this whole other story going on in it. And when I was rewatching it to write cinema symbolism too, I picked up on a couple things that I actually could have put in cinema symbolism. And these guys are very adroit with this material. And I agree. I mean, I think in most instances it's placed there. I think it's like anything else. There's always exceptions to every rule. I mean, you do have art imitating life, as the phrase goes. So, I mean, it's the idea that the camera captures everything, and the filmmakers are also subject to the collective unconscious, and whether they know it or not, they're including it. I think there's some truth in that as well. But I think a lot of times these guys in Hollywood, are very conscious of what they're doing, are very aware of this, are definitely utilizing it for economic purposes, for mythology purposes, for myth making, so that their film sort of transcends Hollywood and becomes almost modern mythology. I mean, you'll see this all the time. I was just on another show talking about the same sort of thing. It's like even with the Oscars. I mean, they give the awards to the movies that they consider the most artistic. So, I mean, very, very seldom do you see the blockbuster, winning the award. I mean, they view themselves as, as Renaissance masters. That's the way they view themselves. And that's what they do. I mean, they're creating living artwork, for lack of a better word. So, I mean, yeah, to answer your question, I do believe it's intentionally placed. I've seen way too much evidence of it for this to be happenstance or coincidence. So to answer your question, I do think it's intentional, but I do think you have to allow for the collective unconscious and for these guys also being subject to this influence as well.
I agree. Mike D., do you want to jump in here for a minute?
Yeah, I think if you look at the clever ways, and the word clever comes to mind, I'm thinking of Stanley Kubrick. I mean, that's I'm thinking of the movie Eyes Wide Shut, I should say, Eyes Wide Shut. When I first saw that many years ago, I thought it was just boring, slow, pretentious. And then when I started to come around to new ideas of thinking and started to research all this stuff, I rewatched that film, and this film is absolutely amazing for the imagery and the symbols and the meaning of that film. it's just amazing to me. And we can go into that later, but that is one film that we should definitely talk about.
Right, Robert, whatever you want to do, you want to start with Harry Potter or you want to start with Kubrick, which I think is one of the big ones that listeners really want to hear about, wherever you want to go with it.
I could start with Harry Potter, but these are, I just want to predicate this. These are two films we're now dealing with that are not in cinema symbolism. These are in my next book, actually, Cinema Symbolism 2. But I could do a little Harry Potter, and I can do some Kubrick as well. I'm taking on the Eyes Wide Shut movie in Cinema Symbolism 2, but to be brutally honest with you, I haven't watched it in a while. So I would somewhat feel a little... not as confident as talking about that one. I certainly can do The Shining. Shining is something I talk about in Cinema Symbolism, and that has a lot going on in it as well. But Harry Potter I don't mind talking about because that does tie into some of the themes of Cinema Symbolism. What happened was, it's an interesting story, I don't mind telling it. When I was writing Cinema Symbolism, I took on the three Matrix movies, then I took on, I can't remember the order they come in, and then I took on all six of the Star Wars movies, and then I took on, what came after that? It was, the Lord of the Rings, the Tolkien material. And again, these series of movies are just embedded with all kind of, esoteric in them. All of them are. And it was after the Lord of the Rings, I was originally going to go into the Harry Potter and the C.S. Lewis material. And it was just no way. I just thought, this book will go on forever, and, there's just absolutely no way. And so I thought, okay, I'll cut out the C.S. Lewis and the Harry Potter material. The tie-in, the nexus with Harry Potter and the Star Wars and again, the Harry Potter stuff is also, just to be clear, this is something I'm working on now. I haven't watched some of these movies, so I'm not, some of them meld together, Half-Blood Prince, Goblet of Fire, yada, yada, yada. But in a nutshell, the Harry Potter films and the stories also, kind of tie in. Well, they don't kind of. They do tie into Star Wars, Matrix, Lord of the Rings. It's the Joseph Campbell monomyth. Is the nexus you're looking for. I mean, it's really, the same sort of archetypes, the same sort of storyline. You have the Luke Skywalker character, going on the grand adventure, Neo going on the grand adventure, being called away from his everyday life. Frodo Baggins, the same thing. I mean, it's the same thing with Harry Potter, called away from the everyday life to find out he's this great wizard. And you get it. This comes straight out of the world of Joseph Campbell, who is a very famous, I imagine most of your listeners know who this is. If they don't, he's a very famous American mythologist, symbolist. And he wrote this book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And make a long story short, it's sort of the solar journey, this character who's the archetype savior figure. And while he's going on the solar journey, certain things happen to him. There's sort of like conditions, in order for him to accomplish his missions, X, Y, and Z has to happen. And you'll find these same, not all of them, but you'll find a lot of them overlapping in all these movies, Harry Potter included. You'll find like in Star Wars, you get the call to duty where, Luke has to leave Tatooine, Neo has to leave, the phony realm to go to the real world. Frodo has to leave the Shire, and of course Harry Potter has to go to Hogwarts. You'll always find that the hero figure is always assisted along the way by a hermit. The hermit, wizard archetype, the Hermes Trismegistus figure. I mean, these guys even look alike. Gandalf the Grey, Albus Dumbledore, Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is the old Greybeard. He turns up in the Matrix as Morpheus. So, you have these conditions that are, that the hero always kind of goes through, or events. That you'll find in Star Wars. I document this in Cinema Symbolism with Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and Matrix. Harry Potter is something I'm talking about in Cinema Symbolism too. But a lot of the elements of the Campbell monomyth. I mean, and again, you have the Dark Lord figure, Darth Vader, Sauron, the architect or Deus Ex Machina, and of course Voldemort in Harry Potter. So I mean, it's the same sort of themes going on, in these same stories, coming out of this Campbell monomyth, which is really part of the collective unconscious, part of ancient mythology. You read the works of Carl Gustav Jung, Sigmund Freud. It's part of our being. It's part of our makeup, this story. And of course, this is why, these psychologists will tell you we're so drawn to these stories. It's just part of who we are, and why Star Wars and Harry Potter and, these movies just, become these massive blockbusters.
Why they do so well. I mean, to me, it just seems like
Right.
if you can understand all of that, what you're explaining, I know you're on a roll, and I hate to cut you off for a second.
No, that's okay.
It just seems to me if you
Go
can
ahead.
if you can understand that, you can really make a blockbuster out of anything, because if you just use those same basic principles and follow the same format, you can turn anything into a blockbuster.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost if you follow, really those movies, those stories. I mean, it's the same sort of. I mean, you'll find it also with the Lewis material. C.S. Lewis has a lot of this as well. It's the same story, just with new names ascribed to the protagonist and the antagonist. I mean, but it's the same. I mean, you even find. In a lot of these movies. It ties into, you get into these ideas of the solar figure, the solar savior. It's Neo Anderson who's going to save, the world from the machines. Luke Skywalker's going to save the galaxy. Frodo Baggins is going to save Middle Earth. Harry Potter's going to save the world in Hogwarts from the evil wizard. Where does this sound familiar? Jesus Christ is going to save mankind from, death. And you'll find you'll find the same, story and the elements of the Christ story, the Christ solar story, in these same modern retellings of them, death and resurrection, where Neo gets killed and is resurrected, Harry Potter is killed and resurrected, the conflict with the Dark Lord, assisted by, helpers along the way.
And Robert, I think, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, now that you say that, I'm very, very much aware of the resurrection, the death, the symbolism of the sun, and the cycles and things like that. I talk about it on the show all of the time, and I put a lot of that in my book, The Grand Illusion. And now that you're saying that, I'm just starting to think. I remember when I watched the Spider-Man movies, not the newest one, but the one before these came out, and then even the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. And I remember thinking, anytime I watch a superhero movie, you always see the first one where they get their superpowers or they become who that character is. And in the second one, there's like this symbolic point where the character no longer wants to be that hero. And it's almost as if that they die for a point of time, and then they're resurrected, and then they save the day, or they save whatever they're supposed to save by the end of the movie. And I always thought, what is that as a kid? And now I'm just kind of making that realization now that that's part of the death and the resurrection, part of that same symbolism that you're speaking of in all these other movies.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even you get into the lore of superheroes. My goodness, yes. I mean, you have the One. I'm glad you brought this up, because the One is just. I mean, you look at Superman. I mean, the only begotten Son sent to planet Earth with the superpowers to save mankind from itself. Where does this sound familiar? You look at the Superman movie with Christopher Reeves, the first one. I mean, Lois Lane is killed and he resurrects her. He brings her back to life. In the one that's over the top is the one that just came out with Kevin Costner, and the one where Kevin Costner plays the Earth Father and Russell Crowe plays the Alien Father. Man of Steel. My goodness, I mean, you just want to see the Christ myth and the Christ story, all over. I mean, Superman is 33 years on Earth when he comes out as Superman. Boy, what does that remind me of? You will pay attention when you watch that thing. He is constantly, Superman in that movie is constantly flying around cruciform in front of the sun. And in fact, at one point in it, the father, the Russell Crowe figure, when he's telling him, he literally says to him, I just couldn't believe it. My jaw hit the floor on this one. He says, you're going to save these, he says, you'll save the humans. You're going to teach them how to be, they want to be great, but they need this guidance that you're going to show them. Where does this sound familiar? I mean, does this not sound like, the whole Jesus story all over again? But then he actually says to them, this is Russell Crowe speaking, he says, you will make them one with the sun. I mean, it's just like, what a giveaway. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I heard it. I'm like, wait a minute, did I just hear that? I mean, and he is constantly, if you watch The Man of Steel, pay attention to how many times the Superman character is flying around cruciform with his arms stretched out, just looks like the crucified Savior in front of the sun. It's uncanny.
And this is the new one?
Yeah, I mean, this is the one with this is the one that came out, I want to say, a couple years ago. Amy Adams was Lois Lane. I can't remember the name of the guy who played Superman. Kevin Costner is in it. Russell Crowe played the I guess it would be Jor-El would be the father. Man of Steel. I mean, that really presents the Superman, the Superman figure, Clark Kent, as the savior, Christ figure of planet Earth. I mean, and they don't even. I mean, it's like you said, you get used to it. I mean, this stuff was just right in your face. I mean, this wasn't even being subtle about it. I mean, this was just obvious symbolism.
I looked up the actor. I think it's Henry Cavill played Superman.
Yeah,
in
that's
that movie.
it. That's the one. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, all of this stuff is just so incredible because, I've said it, then you said it, then you repeated what I said. It is so in your face. And when you start to just open your mind to it and you start to just have an awareness of it, you see it not just in movies, but you see it in music videos. You see it in television commercials even. I mean, this stuff, once you kind of become aware of it, Robert, how do you not go crazy trying to put everything into the book or trying to write everything down and get a handle on everything that you see around you? How do you isolate what you want to discuss?
Well, I isolate. You got to limit yourself. And what I basically do is I really go for movies that I really can pin it down in. I haven't done. I really have never taken on. I don't take on commercials. I'm taking on in cinema symbolism. I'm doing some more on TV. In cinema symbolism, and I am going into a couple music videos in cinema symbolism too. But yeah, I mean, I flirt with this also in, I mentioned some of the stuff in the X-Files, some of the stuff in the background. But it's just, it's just movies that, one thing that I do is I take movies that, I can really see it in. And it's very subtle. I mean, some of the stuff, like with the Superman, I talk about it. I mean, it's worth mentioning, but some of the stuff is very subtle, and I kind of like that, like revealing, I mean, just so subtle. I mean, some of it's very obvious, like, we were talking about. Some of it's very subtle. So it's just movies that I see this in, and I can see the director kind of what he's going for. It usually, I've mentioned this on other shows, and I'll mention it here. I mean, it's without question, I need to watch a movie 2 or 3 times to really pin this down. I mentioned at the top of the show, Black Swan. Aronofsky has snuck a couple things by me in that, more than once. So I mean, not even I'm perfect. It's these guys are very adroit with this material. Some of them.
Yeah,
and
you're going to have a field day with Eyes Wide Shut then, if you're covering that for the next book. I mean, that movie could take half your book up.
Well, the one that I did was The Shining, and that just I touch on in the movie in the cinema symbolism, the book that's on now. I get into The Shining a little bit, but I go much more in depth with it in cinema symbolism too, just with a lot of the repetitive nature of the whole movie. I mean, the whole thing is just one repetitive cycle after the next. And this is to symbolize just the reincarnation in the hotel. But yeah, I have. It's funny you mentioned Eyes Wide Shut. I actually have that here. I have it on DVD. It's been a while since I've watched it. I mean, it's been really quite some time. But it's something that I'm doing in cinema symbolism too, and it's definitely on my to-do list. I'm writing cinema symbolism 2 now, and I'm doing a whole thing on Eyes Wide Shut. I have it here. I just haven't watched it in a while, and it's probably I won't get to it till this summer, to be honest with you. But I have dissected The Shining. Backwards. I talk about it a little bit in cinema symbolism, but it's a movie that I really, went all in on in cinema symbolism too. But yeah, Kubrick's, another one of these guys who's really a master with this, or was a master with this stuff. So yeah, I mean, the fact that you find it in his films, a lot of veiled symbolism. I mean, when you watch his films, almost, and especially this is the way with The Shining, and it might be with the way with Eyes Wide Shut. I'll have to wait and see. I've read this criticism before. I mean, it's almost that he went so overloaded to veil some of these icons in his films. he forgot about the movie. I mean, he forgot to tell the story of the movie. The first Shining, the original Shining movie, Stephen King hated it. Stephen King didn't know what the hell he was watching. The original, the book is like a ghost story set in a hotel, and it's really about the ghost preying on the writer, and it all coming to life. I mean, and Kubrick turned it into this very strange story about, reincarnation and, I mean, I know this is in the book too, but just repetitiveness. You have, and just, and when King watched it, he hated it. In fact, Stephen King hated it so much that he went back to Warner Brothers and bought the TV rights to it, to his own story, and in the mid-'90s produced the Shining, which aired on TV, which was more to his liking, which is the ghost story, essentially. But Kubrick really created this sort of alchemical reincarnation, symbolic, movie that I don't think King knew what the hell he was looking at. But I mean Kubrick, no question was a real expert, in embedding this arcana in films.
Well, let's go ahead and take a short break. We're with Robert Sullivan, the fourth author of Cinema Symbolism, a guide to esoteric imagery in popular movies. His information is linked up at www.thesecretteachings.info. That's www.thesecretteachings.info. We'll be right back with Robert Sullivan, the fourth, right here on The Secret Teachings. Stay tuned.
At The Secret Teachings, we are not a part of any group, label, and we do not attempt to fearmonger, as some of the topics we discuss may seem scary. I advise you not to be afraid, but to be informed as we discuss current events and ancient history, astrotheology and symbolism, the paranormal and the occult, the esoteric, health, and much more. I am not here to tell you that what I say is truth, but to allow you to decide for yourself based on the evidence presented and the dots connected. Information is not negative. It is how you view it that determines the dimensional characteristics of either dual aspect of negativity or positivity. To catch the show, we air every Saturday on the Dark Matter Radio Network at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and every Sunday on the L&M Radio Network at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also listen and download past episodes for free at thesecretteachings.info. Try as you might, but no amount of disinformation, propaganda, rhetoric, or trolling will change the truth. The truth is the truth, regardless if the masses accept it as is, or if it is accepted by only one out of billions. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. For more information, you can visit thesecretteachings.info. Namaste.
There is a better radio show, beyond that which is known to the people. It is a radio show more informative than others, and as timeless as infinity. It is the equilibrium between light and dark, between the sheeple and the paranormal, and it is heard at the base of man's ignorance and at the summit of his knowledge. This is the radio show of imagination, a show we call The Secret Teachings.
Understand is to perceive patterns. Now, of course, course, what this means is that true comprehension comes when the dots are revealed and you get Stephen Johnson's long view and you see the big picture. This is the idea about patterns, recurring patterns across different scales of reality. You know, Paul Stamets talks about the mycelial archetype and how the information sharing systems that comprise the internet look exactly like computer models of dark matter in the universe, look exactly like the neurons in the brain. They all share the same intertwinkle filamental structure. It's the rise of networkism as big data advocates talk about how man-made systems are looking exactly like natural systems. The more we can measure, the more we can visualize. The more we can visualize, the more it expands our consciousness by seeing these recurring patterns across scales of reality. It blows my mind, and I think that technology increasingly is becoming an expander of human consciousness. It extends our thought, reach, and vision, and revealing so much more. It's like, whereas once I was blind, now I can see. Jeffrey West from the Santa Fe Institute is telling us that cities are really like organisms. You know, alleys are like capillaries. How is it possible that a man-made artificial technological system is behaving like a natural system? The more efficient it becomes, the more it's starting to look like nature. Really interesting, weird stuff. You know, but it makes me optimistic. It's like when Stephen Johnson says, look, if we can understand all this stuff, we can, I mean, anything becomes possible, right? It's the adjacent possible, standing as a sort of shadow future, a map of all the ways the present can reinvent itself. It's beautiful stuff.
Welcome back to The Secret Teachings. I'm your host, Ryan Gable. The website, www.thesecretteachings.info. That sound clip you just heard was by a man named Jason Silva talking about patterns. We can see patterns, observe patterns all around us in nature and in the man-made mechanisms that we develop. And if we look at movies and television and music videos and even commercials sometimes, we see patterns that emerge, whether it's part of a mythology that has inspired us to produce these movies or films or artwork, or it's something that's part of the subconscious human intellect, or something that has to do with the human psyche that we aren't consciously aware of. We see these symbols all around us. We see them embedded in movies, pop culture. Some people believe certain symbols to be negative. They associate them with the devil. They think that it's such a horrible thing to talk about. And other people, they put certain symbols like crosses around their neck because it means something completely different to them than it means to other people. Today on the show, we're speaking with Robert Sullivan, the fourth Freemason, a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason. He is the author of The Royal Arch of Enoch, as well as the book we are discussing today, Cinema Symbolism, a guide to esoteric imagery in popular movies. And Robert, you know, when I watch movies, whether it's, you know, Harry Potter or whether it's Prometheus, I see symbols, but probably not as much as you do. I see things in like Harry Potter, like, you know, Fluffy, the three-headed dog, the Trinity, Sirius Black, the dog star, and Sirius, he turns into like a wolf, things like that. You know, that's what I see. When you watch a movie, we've already discussed how you see it and how you're able to kind of pinpoint how you want to cover something and why you cover something, because you can pin it down and you can for sure know that that's what you're seeing. Take me through Cinema Symbolism, the first book, A Guide to Esoteric Imagery in Popular Movies. Let's discuss some of the movies that you discuss in that book.
Yeah, I could just walk you through it. Sure, no problem. We get into, I do an introduction where I sort of present some of these arcane themes. When I was writing the book, I wanted to make sure that this book, like Royal Arch, could be read by someone who was very well versed in this material, or alternatively was coming to it for the first time. So like with the Royal Arch, I have a lot of explanatory background information. That's critical. I mean, you got to give some, you got to explain what it is, you're actually explaining and how it ties in. Some of the movies and some of the themes that I take on in the first book, the book that's out right now. I've already mentioned the Star Wars, the Matrix movies, the Lord of the Rings, the Matrix films, the first, the 1, 2, and 3. Is really the Gnostic religion from start to finish. Some of the other themes that you will find of ancient religion and mysticism and Gnosticism. I take on the Exorcist movie, some of the mythology surrounding that, some of the, ideas around some of the characters, who they're based upon, what they represent, some very subtle imagery that Friedkin uses to convey a religious war and a spiritual war and a spiritual remedy as well. And then I actually take on the next book. The next chapter is the Omen movies. These are very unique in that this is, again, the overarching theme of good versus evil, light versus darkness, and the directors of these movies, and especially the third one is off the chart, really draw off of the whole playing on the weather, light versus dark. The Antichrist, is always seeming to come to power during the autumn and winter months, and is always weakened at the vernal equinox. And again, this ties into the Christ myth or the Christ story of, Jesus being resurrected at the vernal equinox, Easter, Passover, and the final movie, believe this or not, and that this is a whole other study as well, and this is something we could talk about. One of the themes that I get into briefly, and something else I talk about in cinema symbolism too, is, we talk about the art, the symbolism and the arcane meanings. Actors and actresses can actually be cast for an occult purpose. And tying into that, a movie can actually be released on a day that has an occult meaning. And you will find this in the Final Omen movie, The Final Conflict. This is the one where Jesus returns at the vernal equinox, of course, is resurrected. The light overtakes the darkness. This is when the Antichrist, who is darkness, is finally defeated. And the movie, the Third Omen movie, was actually released on the vernal equinox of 1981. So that's an instance of actually the release of the movie has an arcane meaning. And then some of the other movies I take on is the Back to the Future movies. This Robert Zemeckis and Spielberg wreak havoc with your unconscious mind in this. The placement of buildings, the dualistic meanings of buildings, a lot of Egyptian mythology regarding the Osirian cycle in Egypt with Back to the Future, with Marty being Horus driving the sun chariot, which would be comparatively Apollo. Then, of course, George's father would be Osiris, who was, of course, killed and resurrected by Typhon or Tannin in Part 2. So a lot of Egyptian mythology going, and numerological symbolism in the Back to the Future movies as well. Some of the other material, the James Bond movies and the occult world of Ian Fleming, the influence on Aleister Crowley and the 007 John Dee sigil, and a lot of the James Bond movies, deal with a lot of Gnostic themes of the sacred feminine and the masculine. This is what would be called the alchemical wedding, the unification of the sun and moon, where the hero has to unite with the sacred feminine to go in and defeat the demiurge-like villain who is always this over-the-top, grandiose, demiurge like, illuminist who wants to take over the world, or alchemist like Auric Goldfinger. So that's something I take on as well. And of course I mentioned the 3 monomyth movies. And then I get into a lot of ideas of the goddess in film, both positive and negative, the negative and positive representation of the female in film. You'll find the positive in movies like the Aliens movies with Ellen Ripley, who of course, like, all good savior figures who wants to save the universe from the xenomorphs, gets killed and resurrected. And I get into some comedies at the end of it with some of the archetype characters. You'll find in some comedies as well, Ghostbusters, and some of the Egyptian symbolisms in that. You have a lot of astrological symbolisms or characters really based in Ghostbusters. And this is paralleled with another movie that came out a little bit before it called 9 to 5. Those movies are actually the same movie, only completely reversed. So yeah, I mean, and then of course, in the one I'm leaving out is, in cinema symbolism, in Royal Arch of Enoch, I mentioned this earlier, was one of the movies I took on, which is the whole solar legend, is the King Arthur, is the King Arthur movie, Excalibur. The Arthurian legend is just the solar story from start to finish, and really the best movie to see that is the John Borman Excalibur movie. I want to say it came out in 1981. And of course, you actually find some of these astrological, Gnostic, esoteric carried on in the Monty Python Holy Grail movie. You'll find some of these exact same themes going on. And of course, with the Python gang, you had Terry Gilliam, who is very interested in Gnosticism. You'll find a lot of Gnostic themes in his movies, a lot of Masonic themes and things like the Baron Munchausen movie. What's the other one? Brazil has a lot of, very, esoteric themes in them. There's another one too. Oh, the 12 Monkeys. The 12 Monkeys movie. We talked earlier about the Christ Savior, the Christ figure, the Savior figure. Again, this is 12 Monkeys, 12 Houses of the Zodiac, who's looking for this? The Son figure, James Cole, JC, Jesus Christ, comes back in time to do what? Save mankind from itself. Who's the only person who believes him? Mary Magdalene, the sacred feminine. This would be the Catherine Raleigh, Madeline Stowe character. So you'll find this with Gilliam, and you'll find a lot of this esoterica and astrological themes going on in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. There are other movies I talk about as well, just generically, in sweeping. I get into a lot of the symbolisms going on with the transition of the classic monsters of Universal Studios, things like Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, which have their own mysticism attached to them. I mean, that's a study in of itself. I mean, then you get into the whole Hollywood fascination with the radiation, the giant bugs, the space alien invasions. This has to do with the Red Menace and, the fears with radioactive testing from the development of the atom bomb. That's something else, and then, of course, I touch on things like The Shining, the Halloween movies. Again, it's just a vast study. There's something in there for everybody, literally. And again, there's, this is cinema symbolism, and there was even more that I wanted to talk about, and this will be tied up and be continued on in cinema symbolism too.
Mike D., did you have something to add?
Well, the Knights of the Round Table, there was 12 of them, right?
Oh, that's absolutely right. You're right. You have, this gets into the whole astrological lore. You really want to see, if you wish to see the King Arthur solar legend, or King Arthur as the sun, it's really the Excalibur movie. This is something I took on in Royal Arch, where you're right. I mean, you had the 12 Knights of the Round Table. This is the 12 Houses of the Zodiac. This is the 12 Apostles in the New Testament. You have, in some Arthurian legends, you have 24 knights. This is the diurnal and nocturnal phases of the Zodiac, just the Zodiac cut in two. My goodness, you have, I'm just going through this very quickly, in Excalibur, you have him pulling the sword from the stone at Easter, which is the vernal equinox. This is, of course, coming from the Christ story of the stone being rolled away and Jesus leaving the tomb. So you have Arthur pulling the sword, which is the sun ray, from the stone, which is the stone being rolled away, coming forth at the vernal equinox. You have King Arthur as the sun, with the knights, the helpers. Of course, like all solar, legends, you have the traitor figure, Judas Iscariot, in the Jesus story, and of course in King Arthur it's Mordred. When Mordred is exalted and is coming to power in Excalibur, this is the Scorpion. This corresponds to the astrological sign of Scorpio, and this is of course when the sun's going to go into death. So as Mordred's becoming powerful, King Arthur is going into that weakened stage when the land's dying off, and of course, to symbolize this, you'll find Mordred in the golden armor, because the sun's now in the house of Scorpio. Mordred doesn't carry the sword, he carries the spear, which is the Scorpio stinger. Just a ton of, astrological symbolism going on in the Arthurian legend. If you're interested in Excalibur, check out the Royal Arch of Enoch book. The Monty Python movie has it as well. Look no further than when you're watching Monty Python and the Holy Grail, pay attention to the very first scene where King Arthur and Patsy come up over the horizon, clicking the coconuts. Pay attention to the symbol on King Arthur's chest. That tells you everything you want to know as to who he represents. Check that out as well. And Monty Python is something I dissected in cinema symbolism too. Oh, excuse me, in cinema symbolism.
That's incredible, Mike.
It's coming out soon. You know how long it took me to read the Royal Arch of Enoch, your last book? Man, there's so much information in there. I had to really, when I read it, I had to really pay attention, because it's just so in-depth and just so much information. I was like, I don't want to miss anything, because it was truly enlightening. It really helped me understand, Freemasonry. And then towards the end of your book there, then you start getting into the movies too, which was very interesting. I loved that book.
Well, I really appreciate you. No, I was just going to say I really appreciate you saying that. When I was doing Royal Arch, I really sort of wanted it to be sort of like a book that kind of was going to be the only book you needed to read about Freemasonry. I'm actually working on, and I don't mind talking about this at all. You ask me anything you want to, guys. I talked about cinema symbolism too. I'm actually writing 3 books at once right now. I'm doing Cinema Symbolism 2, which we've mentioned. I'm actually writing another book on Freemasonry. This is called Freemasonry and the Path to Babylon. And this is going to go even into more of the backstory with Freemasonry. I'm going to go into a lot more of the history with Thomas Smith Webb, DeWitt Clinton, just fill in a lot of the backstory with the Royal Arch that couldn't be included in. I'm going to revisit some of the symbolism of the Federal District. So I'm doing Freemasonry and the Path to Babylon right now as well. And I'm also writing my first work of fiction, which came to being in a very interesting way. It was actually a story that I entirely dreamt. So I'm working now on that as well. When I say dreamt, literally, I was sound asleep and had this dream that seemed to last for about 8 or 9 hours, got up and started outlining it immediately. So I'm actually writing my first work of fiction as well. So I got 3 books here going at once and 2 out, and I'm so glad, that you like the Royal Arch of Enoch. When I hear positive things about it, and people liked it, that's when I know the journey was well worth it.
Absolutely, no.
Yeah, I mean, we got a buddy. We've got a buddy Oz who is a Freemason Scotch Rite. I think what is he Ryan again? Is he 30?
He's 32nd degree, but he renounced his rank.
32nd degree, and like just talking to him, I'm able to converse with him on subject matter after reading your books. I'm more in tune with Freemasonry, so I can mention people to him and knows and some of the rituals and the lodges, and it's like I said before, it was an education on Freemasonry.
And I have something I want to ask you, because people have asked me about this when they listened to the show the last time you were on. Maybe to clear up a little bit of the lore, the cloud that is over Freemasonry. You as a Freemason, as a member of the Scottish Rite, knowing what you know and interpreting specific symbols, going through the different initiation levels and ceremonies, I guess it's a question that people ask me all the time. And
sure,
how is it that you can write books about this? Don't you get in trouble? I mean, that might sound like a stupid question, but let's go into that a little bit if we could.
No, it's a very fair question. I've been asked it before. I have no problem talking about it. The rule of law with what you're asking me is like what can a Freemason write about and not write about and not get into trouble?
Yeah,
with?
Exactly.
To make a long story, this has been mentioned by other Masonic authors as well. If you're writing, what they don't want you to write is sensationalism. If you're a Freemason, and you're a Scottish Rite or a York Rite, they don't want you writing sensationalism, i.e., Freemasons are reptile people, things like that. And they don't want you, if it's a legitimate history book, an interpretation of the Masonic symbols, the Masonic philosophies, the history of Masonry, its influence, that's fair game. You have no problem with that. What they don't like you talking about are what are called the tokens of recognition. This would be the handshakes, the passwords, the pass tokens, things of that nature. That's sort of what they shy away from, or frown upon is the better word I'm looking for. The truth be told, guys, in 2015, this stuff is anywhere you want. I mean, you can find this on the internet in 30 seconds if you wanted to. I mean, there are Masonic monitors that have all this in it that are, online for free in PDF form. That this stuff can all be routinely found out. They don't want you, as a Mason, they don't want you putting it out there because you've taken an oath not to. And that's really, what they frown upon is you're not supposed to put the signs and symbol, the tokens of recognition. You're not supposed to talk about that. In Royal Arch of Enoch, there are a couple times in the book, well, more than a couple times, there are times in the book where I have to talk about this word, this recovered word and things of that nature. And, of course, it has a substitute word in the Blue Lodge. This is what I'm talking about right now is like the lost word of a Master Mason. You're not supposed to write that down or communicate it unless, of course, you're in a duly, lodge of Freemasons that's been, properly opened, tilered, and, you're in a Masonic lodge, basically. So what I did was when I had to talk about this in the book, I just wrote the initials down. I mean, you'll find this in the Royal Arch. That's really as close as I'll go to it. If if you're a Mason and you're in the Scottish Rite or the York Rite or just the Blue Lodge, and you want to write a history book or a book about Masonic symbolisms, its philosophies, you're okay with that. What they don't want is the salacious, scandalous stuff. Albert Pike is a devil worshiper, that kind of, the real hardcore conspiracy stuff. The unsubstantiated stuff is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. And the signs of recognition, that's really, but I mean, if it's a legitimate book and it's well documented and it's history and philosophy and it's symbolic interpretation, you won't have any problem with that.
Yes, I mean, everything kind of comes around full circle for me, because as soon as you say that you put the initials in there, the lost words of the Master Mason, I think immediately the story of Hiram Abiff being murdered by the three ruffians, and how you kind of translated that story the last time you were on the show, and we talked about the uncovering of the treasure beneath Herod or Solomon's temple in the National Treasure movie. It's really incredible how it all just ties together, Robert.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I mean, and again, you get into the idea, and, we talk about this, you mentioned it earlier about the whole thing with the Son, the resurrection, the Christ story, Neo Anderson, Frodo Baggins, Harry Potter. It's the same thing in the Masonic, in the Blue Lodge ritual with Hiram Abiff, where Hiram Abiff is killed, murdered. 12 fellow craft go looking for the body. It's the 12 houses of the Zodiac going looking for their lost solar ruler. And what happens to Hiram Abiff? Oh, wow, he's resurrected. Where have I heard this story before? It's the whole and I mean, of course, that's what the Masonic Lodge is based upon, is the sun. You have the worshipful master. I mean, this is no state secret. I mean, you can find this out online. Or a book. You could probably Google this. This probably be on Wikipedia. Where the worshipful master sits in the east, representing the rising sun. The senior warden sits in the west as the setting sun, and the junior warden sits in the south as the sun at midday. So you even have the setup of the Masonic Lodge is based on the sun. You have this tremendous solar allegory with death and resurrection, with Hiram Abiff being the solar figure, and again, it's the Osirian tale with Osiris being killed and resurrected. And again, if you read Royal Arch, you'll explain the nexus, I explain the nexus with Isis, the Egyptian mysteries. And again, you'll find this theme. It's a very popular one in popular movies such as Back to the Future. Of course, you get into the Campbell monomyth. I'm not going to belabor it any longer, but with, the Matrix movies, with Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, and, of course, Harry Potter. Same theme, just different names on different characters.
Speaking of the names on different characters, here's a question I did want to ask you. I had just written down. When we're talking about heroes, I know superheroes and, movies that come from books, they obviously have a specific name written by that particular author. But even newer movies, that's not necessarily like a repeat. It's maybe like a new story. In terms of the hero and in terms of the villain, is there a significant, symbology or in terms of mythology, or is there like a connection between all of the different names for villains in movies and all of the names for the different heroes in movies? Is there a connection between the names?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say there is a universal connection, but I will say this, that a lot of the names do have, esoteric meanings. That's unquestionable. I mean, that's undeniable. For example, I mean, you have the name. You get into the solar. I mean, I'll go through a couple with you right now. I mean, some tie in together, but and it's not every case. But a lot of the times, the names of the characters have esoteric meaning. Luke Skywalker, the sun. The name Luke comes from lux, light. Latin for lux. What light walks across the sky? The sun. Who does he do battle with? Who did Horus do battle with? Set. So who does Luke Skywalker battle with? The Sith. And of course Darth Vader. The name Darth Vader literally means dark father. What are some of the other ones? Of course, you get to the Jesus Christ figure. We did James Cole in 12 Monkeys. J.C. Another one is the Green Mile with the Stephen King. John Coffey, J.C., who dies for the sins of the South and resurrects the little mouse and can heal the sick. So J.C., John Coffey, you have that esoteric coming in again. Of course, the James Bond characters are the ones that scream off the name, the page with, you have all the women's names are overwrought with female sexuality, the sacred feminine. I mean, every one of them just has a over the top sexual name. You know, a lot of the villains, you know, Auric Goldfinger, you know, the alchemist, who wants to transmute the gold in Fort Knox to make it worthless and make his gold supply worth 10 times the, you know, to triple it or whatever it is, make it 10 times go up in economic value 10 times, he conservatively estimates. You know, the alchemist, the person who transmutes gold, you know, was said to have the golden finger. Auric, the first name, AU is the alchemical or chemical symbol for gold. How's he going to do this? Well, he has to get the Philosopher's Stone, which for Goldfinger is the little nuclear dirty bomb which he smuggles into the country. Hugo Drax, the dragon, you know, who again is one of the Bond villains. You know, this draws upon the symbology of St. George versus the dragon. In fact, James Bond actually quotes that in one of the stories. So yeah, I mean the characters' names in films can definitely have an esoteric meaning, no question about it. It's not always the case, but a lot of times, you know, you will find the James Bond sigil. I mean, I may have mentioned this the last time, you know, 007, that comes straight out of the world of John B., you know, with the spy glasses on the spy correspondences to Queen Elizabeth, and Fleming was very well aware of this. I mean, that's well documented. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of times the names of characters can certainly have, you know, esoteric, you know, meanings, no question about it.
And even like Dark Father, Darth Vader, I think Darth Father or Dark Father, I think of like Father Time, Death, Saturn, all the mythology and the symbolism with that. And I remember just now, I saw a picture of it not too long ago. I think it was in the movie Prometheus, the robot who would later be the main robot in the Alien movies, because it was a prequel. He had the logo of Saturn on his uniform. So, you know, that symbolism is absolutely right there in your face if you know about it. I mean, it even ties in with, I mean, the solar myth has to do specifically with astronomy, astrology, and even astrotheology in terms of where the religious symbols come into play. You know, there's so many different aspects. Is there any, other than the sun and I think Saturn, because I see that myself, is there any other planet maybe besides Venus that gets grouped in with this, or is it specifically focused on, you know, those particular ones?
Oh no, you will have. You will have definitely. You know, the moon, the sacred feminine. You know, the female, the moon. You know, Princess Leia. You know, you have Apollo, the sun god, who would be Luke Skywalker, and of course, Apollo has a lunar sister, and you have Princess Leia, who wears, you know, the white robes of the moon. You know, I come to think of Trinity in the Matrix. I mean, what a name to give to her,
that's
Trinity.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, right. I mean,
and Morpheus is the Greek god of dreams.
Yeah, Morpheus is the Greek god of dreams. There's a dualistic one for you. Morpheus is the god of dreams and sleep, yet it's Morpheus who brings Neo out of the sleep stage and awakens him to the real world. So you have that going on with Morpheus. I mean, yeah, the entire Matrix films. I mean, we could do a whole show on those. I mean, they're just the Gnostic from start to finish. You have the false world, the material world, versus the real world, which is the spiritual world, you know, who they suffer and live in poverty because they shun the material. You know, Morpheus we just got into. You know, you have the demiurge, the creator architect, you know, or the architect, you know, who's the creator of the false material world. He turns up in part 2. In Gnosticism, you had the demiurge, the master of the material world, who has a group of people who work for him called the archons, who are the enforcer angels of the demiurge. This is, of course, the agents in the Matrix movies led by Smith. Then, of course, you have Neo, who is, you know, the Christ-like solar savior. This is confirmed. You know, when Neo comes awake, he comes alive in the real world, and the machines get rid of him. He's risen, cruciform towards the light on board the ship, the Nebuchadnezzar. And then when he's touring, this is a good one, when he's touring the ship for the first time with Morpheus, and he's introducing the crew, he takes them on board he takes them up into the bridge, and you'll see real quick the nameplate of the Nebuchadnezzar, and it says Mark 3:11. And that's an actual biblical reference to Mark 3:11, which says, "Thou art the Son of Man, thou wilt defeat all the demons bow down to you." obviously referencing Neo as the New World Savior who's going to defeat the Archons and the Demiurge. So yeah, I mean, you have a lot of Gnostic themes going on, in the Matrix. Another one with a name, I'll tell you, a real fun one that's a real good one with a name play is in Fight Club, where you definitely have a Gnostic, Freemasonic spin going on in that thing, where you have Tyler Durden is sort of, is preaching the whole abandonment of the, society, the destruction of the material world for spiritual enlightenment. For Tyler Durden, this is deconstruction of the self. And of course, you have this creation of the space monkeys, who are the people who are shedding off the material world. You have this all-male secret society that definitely echoes Freemasonry. And of course, like Freemasonry, you don't talk about it. And then, of course, what's really unique about this is the whole name, is the name of Tyler Durden. Tyler Durden is sort of the gatekeeper of who comes into the inner temple, the mysteries of Fight Club. And, he guards the house on Paper Street, and only you can get in if Tyler Durden lets you in. In Freemasonry, this is the exact same thing. The guy who guards the Masonic temple, who keeps away the nosy people and only lets in the initiated, is actually called Tyler, of all things. It's called the Tyler. So you have this entire name game going on with Tyler Durden being sort of this Masonic Tyler, letting in the initiates to receive the mysteries of Fight Club. And again, you have the whole thing with Gnosticism, abandonment of the material world. You'll find this at the end of the movie with the buildings coming down, standing, where the narrator, as the masculine, is standing next to the sacred feminine, who is Helena Bonham Carter. So yeah, I mean, and again, this is the Trinity character in the Matrix. So yeah, I mean, just a lot of Gnostic themes in that as well, and a lot of nameplay as well.
Yeah, and just a minute ago you mentioned Princess Leia wearing the white robes, and those represent purity, purification. I think it kind of ties in with the white gloves of the Masons. And then I start thinking about the Templars, because there's so much lore about the Templars as there is with Freemasonry. And the Templars have been kind of used, not just a national treasure, but the lore of that, I guess, group, organization, whatever you want to call them, has been used in countless movies and countless television shows. And now we even see it coming through in video games today with, what's the game called? Assassin's Creed. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I played the Assassin's Creed game. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with the Templar influence with Freemasonry, that's really interesting, because when Masonry, it's really, this is something that I talk about really a lot in the Royal Arch. I don't mind talking about it here. I'm just going to go through it very quickly. But when Masonry comes on the scene in 1717, now I know you can craft an argument it existed before that, but as an official society coming onto the scene, in 1717, shortly thereafter, this guy named James Anderson writes this legendary constitutions, or legendary history in his constitutions, where he goes back and traces Masonry back to the Bible, the biblical stoneworkers. It's years later that a Roman Catholic comes along named Chevalier Ramsay, who kind of tweaks this and says, Anderson, I don't disagree with you about the stoneworking part of this. There's truth to that. He says, but the real history of the Freemasonry is a product of the Knights Templar, who is, obviously this this Roman Catholic warrior monk sect. And he says, Masonry is a product of theirs. When they were in the Holy Land, they came in contact with the remnants of these ancient mystery schools, Zoroastrianism, Mithraism, the Egyptian mythology, Pythagoras, you name it, the mysteries of Eleusis. And they transported it back to Europe, and this is what Freemasonry comes out of. So, yeah, this is where the whole Templar, Roman Catholic sort of, take on Masonry comes in, is through Ramsay. But, you're right. I mean, with the Templars, I mean, you have it in the National Treasure movies. My goodness, the Assassin's Creed movies are based on this. Are based on this. I mean, you've had the Templars in the one movie, I can't remember, with Orlando Bloom.
The Kingdom of Heaven.
Yeah, that's it. You have the Templars in that. So yeah, I mean the Templars, and then in the one that's talked about in the TV show on Fox, Sleepy Hollow, the Templars were mentioned in that. So yeah, I mean the Templars are, they seem very popular. They don't, and then of course Da Vinci Code. I mean you've got it ad nauseum in those things. So yeah, I mean very popular subject matter. They don't seem to be, I think the reason it's so popular is because we really don't know what happened. And, we don't know really.
You can kind of put your own story into it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me I mean, I don't disagree that the Freemasonry, modern-day Freemasonry, owes itself something to the Templars. And clearly they got away with something. I mean, you know, what they came into contact with the Holy Land with, that's questionable. Clearly, to me, they found something over there. To me, it's more. I think they came into material wealth, but to me, it would be more of wisdom, you know, or Kabbalistic knowledge. You know, that pertain probably to secrets of geometry and mathematics. I mean, it's right when they come back to Europe that you have these geometric perfected cathedrals popping up all over the countryside in Europe, you know, aligned to the solstices and the equinox, flying buttresses, the sacred ratio, sacred geometry incorporated into these things.
Oh, absolutely.
So clearly, they came into something, but what it is, you know, we may never know.
Absolutely. They built all these Gothic cathedrals that are built with the symbolism of the sacred feminine. You have the rose window, which represents the female, and the light of the sun shines through the window, impregnating or fertilizing the congregation inside and nurturing them like the mother. You have the two, and this is also Lord of the Rings, the two towers, the Twin Towers, 9/11. You have the same thing with the churches, a lot like Notre Dame, Our Lady Cathedral, the two towers, the raising of a woman's leg and the vaginal opening for the entrance of the church. I mean, that symbolism is absolutely there without a question of a doubt. And whatever the Templars found, whether they found something or whether they, in a sense, pretended as if they had some type of secret knowledge and it was hollow and empty, they absolutely had the information about sacred geometry and about the sacred feminine, which I think was basically what the Da Vinci Code was based upon in the first place.
Oh, yeah. They absolutely did. I mean, the incorporation of the sacred feminine to the ancient mysteries is without question. You'll actually find it turning up in Freemasonry in the Blue Lodge Masonic ritual with a reference to the dog star Sirius, Isis, in the 5 points of fellowship, the pentagram, and yeah, I mean you'll find this with a lot of Catholic churches. And you'll find this in the Baltimore Basilica. They usually, not all the time, but a lot of times, you will enter the church from the west and head east. This is the most often the case, so that when on Sunday morning you're praying to the rising sun. On Sunday morning, you'll find this in the Baltimore Basilica. The Baltimore Basilica sits perfectly west to east. You enter it from the west, and the congregation sits facing the east. And literally on Sunday morning, the sun rises behind the stained glass window. Alternatively, you can find it the other way around, where the doors face the east, so the sunlight comes in through the doors and illuminates the altar. You can find it both ways. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct. These alignments to the solstices and the two pillars, no question about that. And it's you're right. I mean, this stuff starts turning up when the Templars come back. So, I mean, the evidence is there, but again, the specifics are missing.
Yeah, I find it so fascinating. The two pillars, also Boaz and Jachin in the Bible, the twin pillars of Solomon's temple. And when I started researching this, it all came at me so quickly. That as I go along, I pick up more and more stuff every day. I was just looking online at the Lord of the Rings, because you said fellowship, and I started thinking the Fellowship of the Ring. Lord of the Rings even kind of reminds me of Saturn again, back to the grand architect, the white robes that the architect in the Matrix wore. You talked about the demiurge who created this fake reality. They engineered it. They created it as a type of architecture, this computer structure. The architect, he had a white beard, which is symbolic of Santa Claus, who lives basically at the North Pole, like the god Odin, who was crucified on the world tree, pierced in the side by a spear, just like Jesus. It's the same story over and over and over again. And even Nebuchadnezzar was the Babylonian king. If people don't know history, they probably don't know that. In terms of everything that we've discussed today, and I'm sure here in the next few minutes we have more to get into, there's a question that people ask me a lot, specifically about my work. And I'll ask you, Robert, what does this all mean? Why does it matter? Is it just something that's really cool and fun to research and to talk about, or is there a deeper meaning here that we need to be aware of for whatever reason?
Oh, I think there is a deeper meaning. I think for me, there was a much deeper meaning to this. With the Royal Arch of Enoch book, to me, and this is something I get into, and it's one of the more controversial aspects of it, was the whole. I'll get to the movie book in a minute, but yeah, I mean, the whole thing with it's a mind bender. I mean, it can really change the way you view reality, and what you thought you knew or what you thought it was is not necessarily true. So I mean, it has a very deep influence upon reality, upon philosophy. I mean, the entire the entire purpose of the Royal Arch of Enoch book was to sort of talk about this historical anomaly that there was a copy of the Book of Enoch, floating around Europe prior to its official return to Europe in 1773, and then its translation in 1881, and that this Masonic ritual was incorporating this. I mean, this is very important because if you read the Royal Arch of Enoch, it's a lot of the symbolism and philosophy coming out of this ritual that is really formulating the United States of America. I mean, I call the United States of America and the Royal Arch a Masonic Republic. I mean, I guess you could almost go even one step further and call it an Enochian Republic if you wanted to. And then you get into the whole thing. I mean, and this is where this really gets mind-bending, is people have asked me this before on other shows, why do you think the book of Enoch was left out of the Bible? It's a no-brainer. It's controversial. I mean, you're dealing with demons and, controversial subject matter. But, I mean, if you read the book of Enoch and you interpret the Bible as an astrological allegory, both the Old and the New, with the age of Pisces being Christianity, the age of Aries being Judaism, the Old Testament being the Aryan Age manual, and the New Testament being the Piscean Age manual. With Jesus being around the water, feeding the people with the 2 fishes, the 12 apostles. Of course, Moses has the 12 zodiacs, the 12 tribes, grows the ram's horns as Aries the ram, has fire symbols around him, and has the fire because Aries is the fire sign. If you understand the Bible as that, and then you read the Book of Enoch, the Book of Enoch gives this away. I mean, basically, in the Book of Enoch, it has the astronomical manual. It says, if you want to be like God, study astrology. And this is what the angels tell him. This is what the demons tell him. It has, you want to be like God, watch the moon and the sun and the stars, and you will understand the way I operate, is basically what the Book of Enoch says. It's sort of the best way I can describe it. It's the astrological key that unlocks the Bible. And this is no wonder that it's left out. This to me is my goodness, you'll find the apostles quoting the Book of Enoch. Which is, what are they quoting? They're quoting, a guy who's talking about astronomy with demons. And there it is. This is sort of the Book of Enoch. Forget about the Masonic portion of it. It's really sort of helps you unlock these mysteries of the New Testament and the Old Testament. So I think it's vastly important. I think it's much more important than, this is just, neat stuff. And as far as the movie book goes, to me, it's just incredible. The lengths that these filmmakers will go to incorporate this entire sub-story into these movies that it's again, once you understand the symbolism and you understand what it's trying to convey, you will find that these movies have an entirely different storyline than what's presented on the celluloid. There's celluloid, and then there's what's beneath it. And really, when you're dealing with what's beneath it, you're really dealing with this treasure trove of mythology, symbolism that really is a representation of the human condition. And that I think that's why these books and this research and this study, not only mine but other people's as well. I know you're into this big time as well. Have your books out as well. This is an incredibly important subject matter and subject matters to be talking about. This is, I think even right now, to be honest with you, and I don't mind going out on a limb to say this. I think personally for me, the true understanding of this material that you and I are talking about today, and believe me, I am not saying this to set myself up on a high horse or anything like that, because believe me, I have bibliography pages where people can read books that I base my books on. But I really think a lot of the things we're talking about right now are still, are really not going to be understood for at least another 50 to 100 years. I think this material right now, it's getting out and people are beginning to understand it. But I think really the vast study of this is going to come for the next generation. That's what I honestly believe.
Mike, what do you think?
No, I agree. There's definitely, it's like a rainbow, right? There's the seen side and there's the hidden side, and I agree with Robert. I think down the road, people are going to be seeing more of these symbols and these images and these meanings, and they're going to get it. Even I didn't. Even a couple months ago, I would walk by where I would see a picture of a dome structure, and I had no idea. I said, that looks like a nice dome. It's cool looking, but really had no idea the symbolism of the dome or pillars or the way our Capitol is laid out or who laid out our Capitol and what they were about, what they were trying to show. So, yeah, agreed. I mean, even going back to the Templars and seeing Christopher Columbus, what he had on his sails of the white and the red cross, looking back as a kid, I had no idea. Or even like the pirate flag. Oh, look at the pirate skull and crossbones. That's cool looking. But not knowing where that originated from. But when you get older, I hope for most people, and you start questioning things, and you start researching, these symbols and these images come to light.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, I wasn't born knowing this material. I mean, it took years of research, and it's the same thing. I mean, I remember back in 1985, the first time I saw the Back to the Future movie. This is when it was just released to the theater. I mean, I loved it, but I mean, I didn't know what. I just understood as a guy who went back in time and interacted with his parents and then, had to change it all back and went back. I mean, I had no idea that I was watching really mythology based on an ancient legend. And it's the same thing with a lot of these movies. And it's really, it's really uncanny, and it's a fascinating study of the movie, and then what lies beneath the movie that is veiled and revealed to the viewer through these symbols and through these characters and through the most subtlest and nuanced things that if you're not looking for it, it's going to go right by you.
It doesn't. In fact, I was just glancing at some stuff I had pulled up about, different movies and whatnot, and we had already talked about the Lord of the Rings. But when I see Sauron, the Eye of Sauron, with the two, or it's kind of like a little cup or something that his eye sets in, but it reminds me exactly of the horns of Hathor or Isis and the sun disk in the middle. It reminds me of the layout of the Vatican with the obelisk, which represents the ray of sunlight, male creative force in the middle. The Vatican is laid out in that same exact format. It has a connection to the raising of Venus as a morning and evening star in the east and the west for a specific cycle, and then that symbolism gets into that of the apple. It ties in with the Garden of Eden. That's just a whole other thing in and of itself. It's just something that's what I think when I just see a movie cover like Lord of the Rings. It's just so much comes at me. Robert, what about this other movie? What was I thinking about? The Wizard of Oz. I know you had spoke about that on another show before, and I know that has more of like an economic symbolism to it. Could you explain that a little bit?
Oh yeah, well you have with the Wizard of Oz, and this is something in cinema symbolism. I'm glad you mentioned this. I had forgotten to mention this earlier. Yeah, I mean I'll just go through it quickly. You have three levels of symbolism going on in the Wizard of Oz. You have the story, of just this girl, this farm girl. And again, this is the average person being carted away to this magical land, having an adventure, then going back home. Story over. This is what you would call your profane explanation. But then you have the two deeper meanings of this movie and the story and the book. And the book, I should point out, was written by a man named L. Frank Baum, and he was a member of Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy Society. And that's important because you have an economic, socio-political allegory going on in The Wizard of Oz, where it's basically a story of 1895 to 1905 America. But then you also have a deeper story going on of this initiation into the mysteries, Gnosticism, Epiphany, Revelation, divine spark being lit, and subsequent reaction to it. The economic, parable. I'll just go through it quickly. You have the tornado destroying the farm. This is a representation of the Depression of 1895, where the farm is taken away and a lot of farmers, lost their farms to foreclosure. She gets whisked away to the magical land, and of course she encounters. The Wizard of Oz is President William McKinley, who lives in Emerald City, symbolizing green money. The yellow brick road is the gold standard, which leads to the creation of paper money. And of course, you have to have gold to back, greenbacks. And of course, this is what President McKinley was all for. Then, Dorothy on the way encounters the American farmer, who's the scarecrow, and of course meets the American laborer, who's Tin Man. And then meets the Cowardly Lion, who is a representation of either one of McKinley's political challengers, Eugene Debs or William Jennings Bryan, all bark but no bite, thus a Cowardly Lion. And then, of course, the American laborer, the Tin Man, is immobile. He can't move. And again, this reflects the Depression of 1896, where millions of laborers were laid off and were economically immobile. They went back to work, working through the oil companies. This is why, to get Tin Man moving, you have to oil him up. It's a representation of Standard Oil of the Rockefellers. Then you have, in the book, the shoes were silver. This was symbolic of something called the free silver movement. So you have silver and gold leading to the creation of paper money. And again, this is just the entire political allegory going on. There's much more to it. I'm just going through it quickly. But then on a much even deeper level than that, you have the entire Gnostic an initiation into the mystery religion, a parable or story, underlying story, where Dorothy goes up the winding staircase of the second degree of Freemasonry, which is the tornado. This is the ladder of Jacob, the ladder of Mithras, the ladder of Minerva, to receive gnosis or epiphany. She walks on the golden path of religion, the yellow brick road, which is Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. Where does that lead to? The false messiah, the demiurge. And of course, the demiurge travels around in hot air balloons. This is because all religion is hot air. And what does she find out eventually? That the truth was in her the entire time. That for her, there's no place like home. This is her divine spark. This is her divine revelation. And to be initiated into the mysteries, you have to have wisdom, fortitude, and courage. This is why our three travelers are seeking a brain, a heart, and strength or courage. So you have this entire, and of course she goes back home. She's the divine spark is ignited. She understands this now, but no one else does. This is what you would call the profane, not understanding the divine. So you have this very deep Gnostic ancient mystery school, underlying theme going on in The Wizard of Oz. I talk about it much more in the book. Believe me, I'm just going through this for time, just plowing through it. But you have the political allegory going on in Wizard of Oz, and then you have this entire underlying mystery school theme going on. And this is completely, you'll find this in the Alice in Wonderland a story. It's the same sort of thing, where the girl gets taken to the magical land to have epiphany or revelation. You'll find this in Alice Sebold's The Lovely Bones, which was made into a movie directed by your friend of mine, Peter Jackson, who did The Lord of the Rings, where the girl has to navigate the afterlife to receive revelation. The Jack and the Beanstalk fairy tale parallels this as well. In The Wizard of Oz is you have three really levels of symbology going on, and the whole this should come as no surprise, because like Fleming was into the occult with Crowley. You have Baum being involved with Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy Society, which was, for lack of a better word, I don't want to sound too cliche, was basically neo-Gnosticism. So you have this entire thing going on. Read the book. Read Cinema Symbolism. I get much more into it in the book.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate you joining us on the show today. If you would like to get anything else out, I'll give you a couple of minutes to tell us where we can get that book, as well as if you have a website where people can go and read more about you.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan and Mike. Well, for starters, let me thank you both for having me on The Secret Teachings for the second time. I really appreciate it. I thought it was a terrific show, and I just thank you for the invitation to come back. I really appreciate it. The easiest way to find me and buy my books is on the Internet, which is www, and it's all connected, all lowercase, RobertWSullivanIV.com. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV, so it's the letter I, the letter V, www.robertwsullivanIV.com. From there are links to buy the book, the Kindles, the Nook, the paperback. The Kindles and the ebooks are much cheaper than the paperback. They can be bought at Amazon. They can be bought through my publisher. At my website, you can go to my YouTube channel, listen to other podcasts I've done. Follow me on Twitter. There are Facebook fan pages for my books, and for some of my upcoming books, there are Facebook pages in the works. They'll be released shortly. Just go to my website. It's easy to navigate. There are links to buy the books, more information about me, my biography, links to all my social media, YouTube, Google+, Twitter, all this social media, and my website is constantly updated. So just check it out there. It's the easiest way to interact with me. And if you're interested in what I've been talking about, Royal Arch Cinema Symbolism, www.robertwsullivanIV.com.
Mike D., anything else you want to add or you want to ask Robert before we let him go?
No. It was a great show. Just one thing off the top of my head when we're talking about Star Wars, just a quick off-the-cuff comment. When I think Star Wars, I think problem, reaction, solution. I think David Icke off the top of my head. Just for our listeners out there.
Anyway, Robert, I appreciate you joining us on the show today. All of your information is going to be linked up at thesecretteachings.info. That's www.thesecretteachings.info. Our guest today, Robert Sullivan IV, the author of The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism, and Cinema Symbolism, a guide to esoteric imagery in popular movies. He's got another one and much more in terms of writing on the way. Stay tuned to The Secret Teachings. We'll have Robert back in the future. Again, the website, www.thesecretteachings.info. We'll be right back in just a few minutes with current events.
This is Robert W. Sullivan IV, author of The Royal Arch of Enoch and Cinema Symbolism, and you're listening to The Secret Teachings.
Are you tired of shows about bogus photographs of guinea pigs on Mars or fake photos of Bigfoot in the woods? How about fake paranormal shows that don't actually discuss the paranormal or believe that every object they see in the sky must be extraterrestrial? How about big networks that use alternative news to promote their mainstream agenda, political shows that are one-sided, or shows that claim to know exactly what is happening for ratings, even though an event just broke in the news? Me too. At The Secret Teachings, we are not like any of those other shows. We cover any topic from symbolism to ancient history and from health to the occult, including the paranormal, but we don't just jump on board with every photograph of an orb or sample of Bigfoot hair. We have no political affiliations, no religious backing, and no financial backing. We want proof and not someone's word. If you want proof, or at least a different perspective from a host that can both accept or deny all points of view and all pieces of evidence, without holding onto a preconditioned belief or looking for evidence to support a prior conclusion, someone who can even admit when they're wrong, then check out The Secret Teachings radio show. Airtimes and free downloads are available by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. That's thesecretteachings.info. I'm your host, Ryan Gable, and I hope that you will join us. Namaste.
Welcome back to The Secret Teachings. I'm your host, Ryan Gable. The website, www.thesecretteachings.info. That's where you're going to find all of the current events linked up that we'll be discussing here in just a moment. You'll also find a show archive where you can download and or stream all of our past episodes of the show for free. There's also a link on the website to help support the show. Any donations over $15, and I'll send you a copy of my book, The Grand Illusion Slaves to Perception, in PDF form. You can donate through PayPal at the top right of thesecretteachings.info. Also on the website, promotional pages for all of our guests of the past couple of weeks. Today, of course, we had Robert Sullivan IV on the show to talk about cinema symbolism, and we got into all kinds of things about symbols in movies and television, music videos, even a little bit about video games and the symbols associated with mythology and astrotheology and religions and things of that nature. Really fascinating, interesting stuff. If you missed that, you want to go back and download it later, you can always find it on the website as soon as this show airs. Again, it is www.thesecretteachings.info, and the show is available to download for free. Coming up here in the final hour segment of The Secret Teachings this week, I have a plethora of news articles. I just had news backed up from being off air. So I've got a whole bunch of news to talk about today. And I'm also going to be joined here in just a moment by Ira, who is host of Open Eyes Radio on the L&M Radio Network. It's Ira Robinson, host of Open Eyes Radio. His information you can also find at latenightinthemidlands.com, where you can find a link to his show as well as my show, The Secret Teachings. You probably heard him on The Last Frequency before if you listen to that show that Michael Vera and I host. Ira, welcome to The Secret Teachings. It's good to have you. And there's just so much news to get to. Well, wherever you want to start, let's go ahead and jump in there.
There is indeed, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. I definitely appreciate it. It's always a great time for me to interact with you, especially on a one-to-one basis, because we sort of have the same backgrounds, I guess you could say, in the things that we research and the things that we find to be of interest. And so I'm really glad to be here myself. One of the things that I ran across as far as the news is concerned is something that I've always been concerned about. You know, it's a passion point for me, is the issue of vaccines and vaccinations and some of the insanity that goes on with it. One of the things that I ran across, it just was released within the past couple of days, is the CDC announcing that the new flu vaccine this year is up to 18% effective. 15% effective in those under 2 years old who are most impacted by the flu. So my thought with this is, okay, so this is 18% effective. If this was a test, you know, like a test in school or something along those lines, 18% would be a complete failure. At what point do these vaccinations be considered a failure? You know, at 18%, is that actually something that's a good thing?
18% and 15% in children. I mean, that is beyond failure. That is amazing. I don't even know what word to use. That would be, you know, when I think of things like this, you always see that propaganda come out from whether it's the CDC or the vaccine manufacturers, and they'll say, well, let's be positive about it. At least it affected 18%. But when they say affected, Ira, what do you think they actually mean? Because these companies, when they're giving vaccinations out, they know full well, at least the people that are in the know, if you will, they know full well that these vaccines actually cause the very things that they're supposed to prevent or supposed to heal. And, you know, I know that vaccinations, at least the idea, the concept of it, in an idealistic, perfect world would be a good thing. But when you have criminals and psychopaths using vaccinations, and this is historically accurate, not just in the United States, but in Russia and in China and in Germany and all across Europe, that they have used vaccinations to call the population, to spread illness, to spread diseases in order to, whether it's sell drugs or simply just to call the population. I mean, to me, it's beyond failure. But then again, I think maybe it's not failure, Ira. Maybe it's success. Maybe the lower this percentage is, the higher success rate these people have of spreading these viruses and spreading these diseases.
Absolutely. You may be onto something with that. 18% effective to them may mean, well, it's 18% effective at spreading this disease or this disorder.
Right. Or it's 82% effective at spreading
exactly.
the illness or whatever the case may be. I mean, you know, there's the things that get me is that people will say, well, if you're pregnant, stay away from tuna fish. There's way too much mercury in that. But then that same doctor turns around and says, now roll up your sleeve and we're going to give you a couple in the arm there, which has got, 10 times more mercury than a piece of tuna fish.
Yeah, I think actually effectively it's about 50,000 times the amount of mercury contained within the vaccine as opposed to your average can of tuna.
But hey, it's
a ridiculous number, but it's 18% effective.
18% right? Effective, 18%. And the other thing about the percentage rates and whether it works or not, remember a couple of months ago, it may not have even been a couple of months. It might have been little under 2 months ago. There was that news story. It was on Yahoo, and it was big that the CDC announced that this year's vaccination was basically, they didn't even use a percentage. They just said that it was ineffective and that it really did not help to prevent or to cure anything, that the vaccine, if anything, was just, they obviously didn't come out and say that it causes the flu, but they said it was completely ineffective. But the doctor that they interviewed said that even though it's ineffective, you should still get vaccinated in the off chance that it does work, and then you should also ask your healthcare provider, ask your doctor about antiviral drugs that you can now purchase from the companies that manufactured the ineffective vaccine to start.
Yes, I remember that, and it's ridiculous. You see, that's the doublespeak that they tend to use. Oh, well, this is not effective, but you should get it anyways. They said that in that CDC article about the 18%. Even though it's only 18%, it's better than a 0% effectiveness as opposed, by not getting it. Well, again, what point does it get where it's just the person's natural immune response actually took care of the flu as opposed to the vaccine took care of the flu? And as you well know, I've heard you speak about it before, and as you well know, the vaccines themselves are effective at causing the person to actually start spreading the disease.
Absolutely, and I you might have heard in the background there, I had a clip that started ahead of where I was going to play it. And I don't think it's going to load fully, but I had another article that I had sent you, and you checked it out. It says, study finds that vaccine instead of Ebola made doctor sick. Remember the Ebola doctor, what was his name? Lewis Rubinson, I think was his name.
Yeah, I believe that's the one.
He comes back to the U.S., and he's supposedly infected with Ebola, and he's very ill, he's very sick. Now, other than the weird images of him being taken off the plane inside of some type of like cocoon device, and everybody's wearing hazmat suits with the exception of two guys with clipboards who I guess were immune to Ebola, other than weird stories and photographs like that, if you listen to this news story, and I say listen because a lot of news stories now, if they're not generated by a computer, people don't like writing anymore, so they film a 15-second segment with somebody who's a professional, quote-unquote. But anyway, the article here basically states that it was the vaccination to Ebola that made the doctor sick with those symptoms. And yet, Ira, if you listen to this video, and I implore anybody to listen to this video, go watch this video from Yahoo. It's on thesecretteachings.info. Study finds that vaccine instead of Ebola made doctor sick. If I can get it loaded up here, I'll play it. But it basically says that even though the vaccination makes the guy sick, just like the story from a month ago, you should still get vaccinated in the chance that it doesn't make you sick and instead prevents you from getting sick. That is doublespeak, like you just said. That is Orwellian to a point that is just incredible for this time and day and age.
It absolutely is. And it really frustrates people like me, for instance, who are trying to advocate, at least questioning about the vaccines. Like you said, and I'm in agreement with this, I understand the science behind vaccines. I understand that there is a purpose to it and there may be something to it. But the way that these guys do them is just, it's damaging. It does more harm than good. And of course, the Hippocratic oath that these guys are supposed to follow is first, do no harm. Well, they do as much harm as they possibly can. It's a world of opposites,
It is, and it's all done under the guise of protection. It's like,
yes.
The war on drugs. I was speaking with somebody about this the other night. The war on drugs. All the war on drugs is a way in which that the criminals and the mafia that run the government can fight back against those who have become their competition. So, you're not really a threat. You might go to jail if you're selling drugs on the street, but until you become a very well-known, powerful, wealthy drug lord who is basically running the drugs in and out of a particular city or a town or whatever the case may be, then you become a threat to the DEA, the CIA, the NSA, and the other institutions that are running drugs in and out of this country. So once you become a threat to their bottom line, then there has to be a war declared on it. But where's like the war on, things that actually matter? Like, homelessness, or what George Carlin calls houselessness, as homes are like this idealistic concept. There's never a war on anything that really matters. It's a war that's on education, yet kids' IQ Their IQs continue to drop from an assortment of things, whether it's from vaccinations or additives in food and water. There's a war on education. People get dumber. There's a war on poverty. People get poorer. There's a war on drugs. People take more drugs. I mean, to me, it's just absolute insanity, Ira.
It is, and you wonder if the purpose for it is to actually increase whatever it is that is going on. I mean, that's the only thing that is possible, because that's the only results that have ever come from this. You know, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, you know, it's that whole issue. If every single war that these people have allegedly put on is supposed to be effective against something or effective to do something, then we've had the obvious results. They've done the opposite of the claim to begin with. And that's how it works out. Every single one of them has ended up doing that. The war on drugs increases drug use. The war on poverty increases poverty. On and on and on.
It absolutely does. Everything from education to drug use to, I mean, even when you see like a war, not that it's like officially declared, but we have this idea socially of a war on racism and a war on, different ideas of let's not be, what would I say? Not racist, but let's not be discriminatory, divided amongst ourselves. And yet every single news story from Trayvon Martin to Ferguson was about, look, the black man, the black kid, the innocent kid was killed by the aggressive, racist, hating white police officer. And I just saw another article. I have it up right here. I send it to you from the Associated Press, which is actually owned by the Rothschilds. Fatal police shooting of unarmed 19-year-old prompts protest. And I read it to you, Ira. It says the fatal shooting of an unarmed black 19-year-old by a white police officer. Look, we're like less than 15 words into this news article, and they've already categorized it as a hate crime by association.
Right. They've already used the verbal cues to put that into people's minds.
Yes.
It doesn't take very much to get that program enacted within a person's mind.
That's exactly what it is. You spoke about neuro-linguistic programming and things like that before, right? I mean, that's basically what this is, I feel like.
Yeah, it is. I was trained in using neuro-linguistic programming back when I was working for corporations. And so I know the triggers. I know how it works. I know that once tracks get laid down basically by people reading articles or hearing somebody speak and using different hand gestures and that sort of things, there are tracks that are laid down within a person's mind. You know, I guess you could look at it as being like the synapses are laid out in a trail. And at that point, then, if somebody uses a verbal cue or a visual cue to trigger whatever, train is going down that track, then that's how the person is going to respond. It's not very different, actually, from the hypnotist being on the stage and trying to tell somebody that they're a chicken and they act like a chicken. It's exactly the same way. It's just you can use it in more of a mass sort of a way when you're using neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah,
and it's very effective at using those little subtle cues.
And it's a type of social engineering, and if you really, I think, open your eyes to it, which is, the name of your show, Open Eyes Radio, if you open your eyes to it, you can really see it everywhere. Just like in the last hour we were talking about symbolism and movies and television and things of that sort. You just see it everywhere once you open your mind to it. This article continues. It said that the shooting of the 19-year-old prompted protesters to take to the college town streets, this was in Madison, Wisconsin, and start chanting Black Lives Matter, in quotations, Black Lives Matter. Now, see, the thing about this, Ira, is that I not that you want to side with any particular group of people, black, white, anything. It's just that, in a way you can see why people do things like that. I mean, I can understand the black community has been suppressed for generations and generations and generations and generations. I mean, look at what happened after or during Iran-Contra, the drugs that were brought into the United States through Arkansas, where Bill Clinton was governor. And his brother would actually later serve prison time for drug dealing. And you see that the drugs were brought in, with like Freeway Ricky Ross and the Central Intelligence Agency, brought into the ghetto communities, the black neighborhoods. And that's the same way that AIDS was spread and hepatitis B was spread. There is a targeting of certain, groups of people who do not fit that, like, Aryan, Uberman, Superman, white race. There is a mentality that is playing out behind the scenes of these different agendas. So it's hard for me to look at this and say, don't protest about it, because in one way there needs to be protest. But to protest for one particular race of people, this doesn't need to be Black Lives Matter. It needs to be all lives matter, and stop making it about race, regardless of how difficult it is to separate yourself from what's black and what's white.
Yes, absolutely. There is most definitely an agenda with all of this. And you can even see that there is an agenda in the whole Black Lives Matter portion of things as well, that this is the dividing cue, that dividing line. What we see happening, for instance, in Ferguson, I've spoken about this before on my show, and I don't know if you know about this portion of things or not, but before it became really big, the whole Ferguson protest thing, and before the judgment was given by the grand jury, basically you could see people going out as citizen journalists, and they were interviewing people on the street. So, basically people with their iPhones, and they're uploading to like Ustream and Justin TV and that sort of thing. And you could see that the people in the community there were talking about this incident that happened, where Mike Brown was killed by Darren Wilson. And they were saying that what they're trying to get across is that this is not a racial issue, that this is a community issue. This is an issue of police state aggression that's going on, and that there was nothing racial that was involved in this. And it was black people, white people, on and on and on. All were saying this. When Al Sharpton came in, for instance, the things that they were trying to say was that Al Sharpton needs to go home because he's going to make it about race, and it's not about race. And what happened? Boom, it turned into a complete racial issue. So there is most definitely an agenda with it, and they do seem to go after, for instance, the black community a lot. They have done everything that they can do in that community to destroy the family structure. They have done everything that they can do to, for instance, promote rap, which there's nothing in and of itself wrong with rap. But what I have an issue with is the rap stars that are all about, slap your hoe and get your money and that sort of thing. That puts people's minds into that programmed state where they are going to act upon whatever it is that's coming into them, including doing these kind of actions. So you see that the family structure has been destroyed. They don't care about educating themselves. They don't care, on and on and on. And it's because of this agenda that's being pushed forward. A lot of people don't realize, for instance, that the whole Ferguson issue was actually being funded by George Soros.
And that's the same thing with what happened in Sanford in Florida. That whole set of protests and what we saw in the media was literally being funded. I got the documents from the Department of Justice by the DOJ. I mean, they were actually setting up protests, and they were funding groups to go there and to create a protest, like the Black Bloc group on Wall Street, who would go as a group of anarchists and make the people who were just calling for fairness and equality and abolishing of banks as the real demons of the world, make them look like suicidal, homicidal maniacs. And that's not the case. And it's the same thing with the Department of Justice, the same thing, like you just said, George Soros and Ferguson. There's always that hand behind the curtain who has an agenda. They push that agenda, and that agenda is all about service to self, how much money they can make, how much they can more so control society in terms of whatever the case may be, whatever that agenda is that they're pushing. And they do it under the guise that we're going to protect people, like Al Sharpton, like you said. He comes in and he's acting as this face for the black community when a lot of black people don't like Al Sharpton. It would be like some white guy walking around, and just because he's white, I should be happy that he's walking down the street standing up for white people, when in fact he's promoting racial hatred and violence.
Yes, absolutely. Like he's the shining beacon to everybody else's eyes. You don't want this person representing you. And most of them don't want Al Sharpton representing them. They understand that, for instance, this is a guy who owes, $4 million in back taxes. And yet if you and I had back taxes, they'd be knocking on our doors with guns.
Yeah, it'd be just like that.
Yes, exactly. But Al Sharpton, he's on TV. He can go there, do whatever he wants to do, and still owe $4 million in back taxes, and nobody says boo about it.
See, because he serves the agenda. He promotes that racial hatred, that racial separatism, that division that can so easily and so well it does divide people to a point where even if you were to stand up, let's say you were black, I've seen this in like independent news reports before. It's the same thing with whether you're black or whether you're Jewish. If you stand up for people who, let's say, I forget the guy's name, but there was a prominent Jewish scholar who had come out and he was talking about the origins of Israel. And so instead of saying that this guy is a really intelligent professor, he knows what he's talking about, he's done his research, they call him a self-hating Jew. It's the same thing with somebody black comes out and they stand up and they say, look, this whole thing is racial. Stop making it about black people and white people. Stop making it about racially, motivated white men killing black kids. Let's just talk about the situation as a whole. They say, oh, you hate all black people. You're a self-hating black person. It's unbelievable, the social engineering and programming that people by simple reflex action will just it's on cue. It's like Pavlov's dog. As soon as they snap their fingers, boom, the person has that automatic response. And part of that is just what I read at the beginning of this article. As soon as you read 19-year-old boy, a black 19-year-old boy, killed by a white police officer, automatically, and I do it too, even though I'm awake and aware, as soon as I see that, I think racial profiling automatically.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do too. It's like part of our makeup, I guess you could say. Well, I guess you could say that the masses of people, the great unwashed masses, for instance, that's how I term things. The great unwashed masses, we will do everything that we can do to defend the status quo, and that includes if there are racial divides that are going on, if there are divides going on between the pro-vaccine people and the anti-vaccine people. Whenever there's this kind of divide going on, we automatically always take the sides. It's like we divide ourselves, like we're doing it as a program, and we can't help it. And unfortunately, I have that response sometimes as well, that knee-jerk response to say, okay, well, this is this problem or this problem. And then after that, then I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Let me actually sit here
consciously
and take a look at
become
things.
aware that that's not
Right.
it. Yeah, you have to pull yourself away from it. Even I'm like, why am I thinking that? Why am I thinking that? And then you realize, well, it's part of that social engineering and social programming. And it's not something that necessarily has to be a direct result of someone sitting down with like all these little tiny wires connected to your head and programming your head. That's what people tend to think of. It's not like that. It's more subtle, and it's in movies, it's in television, it's in music, like you mentioned with rap music. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of white police officers who kill anybody of any race simply because if they have that opportunity and they have that much hatred, they're going to do it. But there's just as many black police officers who do the same thing to other races and not just white. When you look at the actual numbers, I want to move on here in a second because we've got a bunch of news. But when you actually look at the numbers, more black men are killed by black men than white men. More white men are killed by white men than white men. So why is it a matter of whites killing blacks or blacks killing whites, which rarely ever gets talked about, when it's a matter of internal racial hatred more so than anything rather than external? Is at least how I see it, Ira. I don't know about you.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And unfortunately, when you say things like that, the first response is, well, you're racist.
You're racist.
and it's a frustrating issue. It really is. One thing that I wanted to get to for sure is because I know this is as much of a passion point for you as it is for me, just like the vaccines thing is. The information that's come out that, for instance, the government under control of Margaret Thatcher was directly tied in relation to the child sex scandals.
You've got my attention.
So, and I sent you that article, what was it, just a couple of days ago, where the information is now starting to actually leak out. The dam, for instance, is starting to break open, that shows that the government was actually very complicit in the events occurring when with the abuse of children, the ritualistic and abuse and sexual abuse and physical abuse of children for many years, and that they did everything that they could to cover it and hide it, and they're still trying to.
Absolutely. In reading this article, because you did send it to me, I didn't find this one on my own, but you sent it to me, and it fits in so well with what I've been discussing in my journey in the last couple of months, being removed from dark matter. And I don't know if you know, but I just finished the new book, False Prophets and the Lovers of Children, which talks extensively about this stuff. I just remember reading about this guy named Cyril Smith, who was the Liberal Party MP. And this guy, I remember reading about dozens and dozens of times in David Icke's books. And regardless of what people think about David Icke, he's crazy, doesn't matter. Dozens of times in this guy's book. And this was like 2 decades ago, David Icke calls these people out. And regardless of anything you think about reptilians or whatnot, there are people like David Icke and other researchers who have called this out for years. And it seems like there's no proof, and it seems like they're just making it up. And then lo and behold, when the story actually breaks, and when the evidence comes out, and when the witnesses come to the stand, if you will, proverbially, these are the same people that are named over and over and over and over again. In some cases, hundreds and hundreds of counts of alleged rape, murder, molestation from some of these very powerful elites within the British government. Now, that's just in Britain. The same thing is true here in the United States. Now, see, I think, Ira, people will read something like this, and even if they'll admit it to themselves, even subconsciously, I already know how people's minds work. The American mind works like this. Well, okay, it's kind of right. I guess it kind of exists, but that's over there in Britain. That doesn't happen here in the U.S. When you see a story from London, I have another article here. It's up on the website. I don't want to move on. I want to keep talking about this, but this other article, it says fluoride in drinking water may trigger depression and weight gain, warn scientists. And this comes from the London Telegraph. Now, people will read that, and they'll think London Telegraph's in Britain. It must just be over there that it causes depression and other types of ailments. It doesn't happen here in the United States. In fact, Harvard scientists in the last couple of years have basically said that if you're in the U.S. drinking fluoridated water, it doesn't affect you as much as it does in other countries.
I've heard you speak about that before, and it's insane.
It's stunning.
That right there is oh my God, it makes my brain fry. It's like all I can do is sit here and think this is what an aneurysm feels like.
It is, and it's like an ongoing aneurysm. This is what we feel this all the time. It seems. You know,
definitely.
I'm glad that you had sent me this article because it really, really sums up so much of what's happened and what's been coming out and what's been unveiled in the last couple of months. You know, I've been intermediately touching on this for little over 2 years now, and other people have been doing it, much longer. Now, whether you feel ill or you like David Icke or you like Kevin Annett or whatever the case may be, this stuff is real, regardless of your opinion of a particular person who's researching it. The stuff is happening. Now, to the extent and to the level and to the exact details, what we have in some cases is physical, documented evidence. What we have in some cases is convictions of people like Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted pedophile who was having sex parties on his island with Bill Clinton and Mick Jagger and
his little black book, man.
His little black book,
yes.
Right? And they threatened the butler for that book. I mean, why? And just like in this article, in this article talks about how the newspaper got a hold of these documents that showed who was involved in these networks, and basically Homeland Security, under threat of national security, comes to confiscate the papers. Now, if there is nothing to hide, it's not like they're promoting an image and this is big in the news, like, pedophile papers unveiled at a newspaper, Homeland Security rushes in to save the day, and they promote that image to the people. This stuff is done under the cover, and it doesn't come out for years and years and years. Why is it? And I say this hypothetically because I don't expect you to answer it, but why is it that these people will do this? They'll enact like special laws, and they'll have special groups that come in and confiscate the material if there's nothing to hide. Why get so irritated and aggravated and offended about it if there's nothing to hide and people like me are just crazy?
Yes, absolutely. And you're right as far as talking about like David Icke, Kevin Annett, that kind of thing. A lot of people focus on the messenger instead of the message, and they try to shoot the messenger, but that's not the point. The point is that there is something going on. It doesn't matter who's telling you. It could be some guy who's, the crazy psycho kind of guy on the street who's trying to reveal the information. But if it's the truth, then it's the frickin' truth. And it doesn't matter who it's coming from. It's still the truth. And that's what you need to pay attention to.
Absolutely.
So the messenger doesn't matter.
It doesn't. I mean, that's why, that's the thing, is that they will attack the messenger, people who don't want to believe it or who are paid to do this, to attack the messenger and spread this information. because it's easier to attack somebody as a person, the ad hominem argument that, hey, if I can't beat you in like a logical, intelligent debate, then I'll just start attacking you as a person. You know, if Ira, you and I are talking about, I don't know, quantum physics, and I have no clue what you're talking about, then I'll just start saying, oh yeah, Ira, well, you used to drink when you were younger. Like if there's no way to defeat it, they've got to attack you as a person. It's so funny because just following the dots and the evidence of what I've covered on my show and I've written in my books and in the new book, you know, very extensively, I was reading this article you sent me, and there's a woman named Liz Davis who is like a social worker. She was a social worker in North London from like the 80s and 90s, and she was, I guess, located where she was as a social worker near the International Office for the PI, Pedophile Information Exchange. And I remember last year talking about Lord Fulford, one of the top judges in London, who was involved in this network and was involved involved with these with the pedophiles who were operating within this big network, which spans to this VIP network, as the article says. And she was talking about how that the Pedophile Information Exchange is basically a home, and she says this, a home to a host of prolific child attackers linked into a network of powerful abuse rings that stretched from Westminster to Northern Ireland, Wales, and the island of Jersey in the Channel. Now, that's just across the ocean. This is an international ring that spans into the United States as well. It's not just over there. And the other thing that I think I found really fascinating about this article was that once again, it's the same exact story over and over and over. Here's what the article said, that Scotland Yard detectives, as they heard statements from victims, claimed that abuse, as these boys that had come forward to talk about their abuse, that the abuse as young boys took place at, quote, sex abuse parties that were attended by judges, politicians, intelligence officers, and staff at royal palaces. Now, I remember specifically with Jeffrey Epstein, remember when that came out in the news? The news story said specifically this, that the sex slaves were shipped to the island and that they were forced to have sex with, quote, politicians, businessmen, royalty, academians, etc. It's the same story. It's not just like, a group of pedophiles are together touching kids. It's a group of high-level politicians, high-level powerful businessmen, members of the royal family, members of academia, doctors, nurses, priests, nuns, and everybody else, as David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, says, otherwise highly respectable members of society. It's just crazy, Ira. When you sent me this article, I read it, and I find the exact same wording in terms of who was involved. It's just a secret network of the same exact people over and over and over and over again, and I digress.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like the island thing, for instance. They did it in a way that they were far enough away out of the U.S. waters into international waters where they would be, quote unquote, free to do whatever it is that they wanted to do. That's how they play this game. They do it in ways that are covered up. Not only covered up just by the people that are in charge, but also by us and the great unwashed masses, because we don't want to face it. We don't want to face the idea that these things are there and that these things are happening. And so we ourselves will fight against the ideas. And that's just insane. It's insanity, because then they'll do things like gun control where they're trying to play off of the children, and they always use the phrases, it's for the children, or we're doing this for the protection of the children. And this is a cue, a psychological cue or a trigger in our minds to defend our children. We automatically go into fight mode instead of thinking in the fight or flight mode. It's always going to be fight mode with it, except in the case of our children being sexually abused. Why is that? That is the weirdest, biggest question that I can ask with all of this, is why we in the general masses can't accept that our children are possibly being abused like this, you know?
Yeah, especially because it's part of that programming when you say, well, who's doing it? If this is true, who's doing it? And then you name somebody like, I don't know, like Cyril Smith. And no, that could never happen. He's a prominent politician. They don't do that stuff. They go to fundraisers. They kiss babies. They don't touch kids. And the thing is, it's like in terms of like when I first heard about virgin sacrifices. And I thought, well, virgins, people who've never had sex. But in terms of in these networks and esoterically, virgin sacrifices don't necessarily mean a young 18-year-old girl in a white robe who's never had intercourse before. Virgin sacrifices mean young, innocent children. It doesn't mean young women who are old enough to have sex. It means children, specifically in terms of these occult satanic networks.
Precisely. They're ritually clean is what it comes down to.
Yes.
That's what the term means. They're ritually pure.
Purified, clean, and that's why they wear the white robes as a sign of purification, which is why the Templars wore the white robes. It's why you see depictions of angels in white robes, purification, cleanliness, unsoiled, if you will. I'm looking back. I was looking in the new book I wrote, False Prophets and the Lovers of Children, and I was just finding all of the different quotes from the articles, and the one that came from the BBC documentary, Ira, if you don't remember this one, where 300,000 children, babies, were taken from their parents, or specifically the mother, at birth by what the article said and was in the documentary, a secret network of doctors, nurses, priests, and nuns. So once again, they were trafficked by a secret network. It's the same exact thing over and over and over and over and over again, just like in Spain, General Franco's dictatorship, where they would kidnap children, re-educate them to be better servants to the state, which is what we saw with the Lebensborn program in Germany. It's the same kind of thing that we have here in the U.S., kids being taken by the CPS, put on all kinds of drugs, and then being reprogrammed and put back into society as these like mind-warped zombies. And
yes, and actually the CPS thing, I was going to bring this up, not to interrupt you, but the CPS thing, there actually has been a lot of evidence that's come forward that shows that the CPS themselves are also heavily involved in this child trafficking industry, heavily involved here in the United States. I just did an episode about this, 2 weeks ago with my friend Joe, who comes onto my show once in a while, and we were talking about some of the issues with CPS, and that is definitely there. For instance, there was one case that came out that two 14-year-old girls came up missing out of a group home. There was no way that they could have gotten out of the home, and the people basically said, oh, well, we don't know what happened to them. And then they found the girls, I believe it was 6 months later, and they said that they had actually been sold out of the house for sexual favors.
Unbelievable.
And this was the CPS themselves that were in control of it.
Well, absolutely. The CPS is like, it's like the TSA. And I remember one of the first things I had got in trouble, but I got spoken to about at Dark Matter was you can't say that the TSA hires pedophiles and thieves. And I'm thinking, why can't I say it if it's true?
If it's the truth. And there is so much evidence out there that shows that that's exactly how it is.
Exactly. You know, I just the last articles I did on Dark Matter was like one of the TSA agents who was indicted on child pornography, and that didn't even have anything directly to do with the TSA. It's just the fact that these people who are either convicted or they've maybe been arrested on it before, and then they're released, and then they're hired by these agencies. It's, in my mind, part of a desensitization program where you go to the airport and you can either choose radiation or you can choose to get felt up by Joe Pedophile, who has been touching kids or photographing children. He's got a whole thing of child porn on his computer at home. And the sad thing is, it's just like we're talking about blacks and whites. If I say don't protest specifically about black rights, let's protest about all of our rights, then it seems like I'm a racist. If I say let's look at history in context, not focus and give special credence to one particular religion or group of people, then I'm anti-Semitic. If I look at this and I say let's focus on abuse on all levels, let's not, break away and push certain things that are uneasy or things that we don't really want to talk about because it's never the time, it's never the place. My wife's here, my husband's here, my girlfriend's here, my boyfriend's here, my kids are here, my mom's here. There's always a problem. People don't want to talk about it. But you know what? It's important to talk about, and it's important to get this information out there. And the biggest thing of all for me is that for people who say that this stuff does not happen, why in the world, and this article that you sent me just kind of proves what I've been thinking the whole time. It says more than 30 years later, after all of this transpired initially, an inquiry into allegations of child sex abuse, rings, murder, and cover-ups has been launched by the British government. It took 30 years for the British government to acknowledge that this is happening and to launch an inquiry into it. this is the thing that gets me. That's not necessarily true. There were inquiries launched into it initially. The problem is that the people who are involved in these networks are the people who are working in government and are the people that are able to squash those inquiries into their ill doings. So when they die or when they're out of office and don't have as much power and influence, that's when 30 freaking years later, the government's able to step forward, the people that actually care, and say, look, we know this has been going on. Let's go ahead and take a look at it.
Yes, absolutely. It's like in that article they talk about in 1984, I believe it was, the newspaper that was starting to break the story. They came in the day before the publication of the articles were to come out in the newspapers and took all of the evidence, took all of the newspaper, the preparation that they had done, took it all. The government themselves moved in and took everything. And so they weren't able to publish it. And they said, basically, if you talk about this, we're going to kill you. That's this was the government themselves that came in and did it.
It's unbelievable. And part of that programming is also what I was just saying. Like if you say something like let's make it about all rights and not just black rights, people call you a racist. Well, it's the same kind of a thing here with this topic. You know how many people have told me or asked me, Ira, and I'm not joking about this, I don't know if I've even said it on air before, have asked me, like, really awkwardly, why do you want to talk about this so much? Are you attracted to kids? Like they're asking me if I touch kids or something. Like somehow it's more offensive that I talk about it than it is for the people that actually do it. It just does not make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, you'll encounter that, definitely. That's that, again, that defense mechanism. That's their line of attack that they're going to do. Oh, well, now you've had this pointed out to you. How less likely are you going to be to say anything because, maybe people are going to think this way about me. But, you're right. You're like me. I know you don't give a crap about political correctness. Political correctness is the bane of human existence. We need to stop with the politically correct bull crap and actually start speaking the truth. The cold, hard truths about this stuff. And they may be hard to face. They may be hard to swallow. But damn it, we got to do it. Because if we don't, we're dead. We're all doomed. And there is no going back from this. They are impacting our children. This is the generations to come that are being impacted by this. What is it? 300,000 children every year are trafficked. 300,000 children every year are trafficked worldwide. And that's an insane statistic. And people look at that and say, oh, well, that must be teenagers or something like that. No, these are babies that are being born and immediately put into this slavery, this horrific crap that goes on. One thing that I talk about sometimes on my show is the idea with radical Islam and that kind of thing, and how, for instance, ISIS, which is a whole different topic, but they'll come out and say, well, we can have sex with children as young as 3 years old. And if it's an infant, if it's a baby, then we are justified, according to the Quran, to be able to maybe not have penetration in intercourse with them, but we can use their thighs. You see, and this is the justification that's being used. It's not intercourse; they're just using their thighs. And see, I get frustrated with this because this is passionate for me. But the thing that's so frustrating with it is that this stuff is there. It's in their book, so anybody can make use of it. And it's this way in the Christian Bible. It's this way in everything, right? Oh. So the thing that I think most people are confused with or defensive about is that a lot of this stuff does come out in the context of religion and religious beliefs. So, for instance, you talking about the network of people, the doctors, the nurses, the nuns, and the priests. You see, it's all this. It's religiocentric, essentially. And
yes.
That's how they justify it as well. So people are defensive about that because, you're talking about my religion there. No, we're talking about the people who are using your religion against you.
Very, very, very good point.
That.
No, that's a great point. That's exactly what it is. So it's like two different kind of defense mechanisms kicking in at once. It's the offensiveness because you've offended their religious beliefs that they have a right to believe in the United States, and then you've offended them in other ways, because maybe in a lot of cases other people have been not even sexually abused but mentally abused when they've been children, and they don't want to even subconsciously revisit that, so their mind blocks it off like a bad car wreck, and they just deny that it ever happened or that it even could happen. Yet and we'll move on here in a second, but it is so well known socially, subconsciously and consciously, that, and I've said this so many times, it's like a joke. It's like a joke that priests rape kids or that priests murder kids. It's so embedded in our culture that it's a nightly joke on your favorite sitcom or your favorite comedian.
It's just like politicians lying. It's just
Absolutely.
like politicians lying. And that's a sad thing. That's something that we need to stand out against. If people know that the priests are abusing the children, and if people know that the politicians are lying, then why not do something about it? Stop joking about it and actually take to the streets and say, get the hell out of here.
Right. It's the joking that is a type of defense mechanism that as people laugh, they just kind of laugh off the fear of the situation and they go back doing what they were doing before. But
Steam release valve.
Yeah, it is. No one ever accused you or me of not being passionate about these subjects. I'll tell you that right now. I've got a couple of other articles here. We've got a little under 20 minutes before today's show's over. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Ryan Gable. This is The Secret Teachings. Our website, www.thesecretteachings.info. We're speaking with Ira Robinson, who is host of Open Eyes Radio on the L&M Radio Network. You can also hear him very occasionally now with myself and Michael Vera on The Last Frequency, which airs on Wednesdays on the L&M Radio Network. And Ira, I've got all these news articles up on my site. You've checked them all out. I mentioned it a moment ago. Fluoride in drinking water may trigger depression and weight gain, warns scientists out of England. It says around 15,000 people could be suffering needlessly from thyroid problems because of fluoride in drinking water, the University of Kent has warned. So scientists are able to do a study, apparently in this case unbiasedly, come out and say that it causes all types of different thyroid problems, it causes depression, it causes all different types of ailments, whether they're neurological or they're psychological or they're physical, and yet England, the government, comes out and says it's a safe and effective way of improving dental health. I don't care if it improves dental health. Why do they forcibly put it into the drinking water when nobody wants it in the drinking water? A lot of local governments don't want it in the drinking water, and they're either paid or they're threatened by authorities that are higher up than them to do that. Why don't, like, for me, it doesn't make any sense, Ira. You're told all these different things, like, drink 8 glasses of water a day. Don't eat eggs. Maybe you should eat eggs. Don't drink milk. Milk's good. There's too much milk, too much water. You drink too much, you didn't drink enough water. All these scientists telling us all these different things, and you're told, well, take vitamins. Vitamins are good. And then you get some people that say vitamins are bad. Don't take vitamins. Doctors will tell you don't eat vitamins, but you should eat a double cheeseburger. It's the most healthiest food that's ever been invented. And it's just people being paid off, people lying, people who are misinformed, people who are ignorant, people who willfully deceive, sociopaths, criminals. It's just, I don't know. There's something really fundamentally wrong with the way things are. And either way, the whole point of all that was just to say that even if it does improve dental health, give me an option. It's like vitamin C or any other vitamin. If we're supposed to take it because it's good for us, how many local governments do you see pouring vitamin C into their local water supply? Yes. 0. So why pour fluoride in to improve dental health when kids' teeth are worse now than they ever have been? Kids with dental fluorosis, their teeth are falling out because of the candy and the sugar and the sweets. It's disgusting how it's so blatant that we've been lied to, Ira, and only a handful of people can get up in arms about it.
Yes, exactly. One example that I give is the fact that when it comes to fluoride, in one average city drinking glass of drinking water from the tap has enough fluoride in it that is more than the amount that the toothpaste container says don't ingest or call the emergency poison control. There's more fluoride in that glass of water than there is in that one little drop of toothpaste that they say, if you swallow it, call poison control because you've just poisoned yourself.
Absolutely. It says it right on the back of the freaking tube. I put it in. I know you read The Grand Illusion. I had an image of it on there. I think I put the image of the fluoride in there, maybe just the bag. But yeah, it says it right on the back of the toothpaste tube. If you don't believe us, just go to a dollar store, look at the toothpaste tube, and it says it right on there. Call poison control if you consume too much of this, or you accidentally swallow it. But once you're done, rinse it out with some water, go in the kitchen, have 8 glasses.
Yes, exactly, and that's the insanity with it. Where is the dividing line with all of this stuff?
It is. It's like the tuna. Don't eat tuna fish, but get a vaccine. Don't swallow your toothpaste, but go drink 8 bottles a day because it's good for you.
Yes, exactly. They want you to drink basically a gallon of water a day that has more fluoride in each glass full. So, 8 times the amount every day than is in that drop of toothpaste that would be poison control worthy.
It's crazy because it's like, you get parents that say, oh my God, don't swallow the toothpaste. We got to call poison control. Here, quick, dilute it. Drink this big glass of water, which has got loads of fluoride in it. And it's crazy to me because when people think of fluoride, they think it's like a mineral or something. And fluoride does appear naturally in nature, and you can get certain levels of fluoride which are okay for you. But the synthetic fluoride that's put into the drinking water comes from the production of aluminum. So not only that, but it causes neurological damage, and that including the geoengineering and the groundwater that's been found with high levels of aluminum in it, coupled with vaccinations, which are full of aluminum, mercury, thimerosal, and a whole bunch of other really, really bad stuff that we don't even have time to get into today, like cleaning detergent and egg protein, which is not necessarily bad, but if you're allergic to it and your doctor won't tell you, you might die because they can't tell you what's in the vaccine. It goes, they don't want to release whatever they put in it because it might threaten their patent on it. It's just complete crap. All of the time.
What I point out to people is the fact that when you go to a doctor and you're supposed to get a procedure done, like a surgical procedure or anything along these lines, they are by law required to tell you every one of the risks that are associated with it. They don't, however, have to do that with vaccines. That's the one thing that they're exempted from having to reveal the information about. Why is that?
I know.
Why is it that the government, for instance, made it illegal to sue vaccine manufacturers? That alone should tell you that there's a frickin' problem.
Absolutely. That is a great point that they did. They made it illegal. You can't sue a vaccine manufacturer for the chemical concoction sludge that they've injected into your child without even telling you what it is. And the thing about it is it gets more crazy every day because in the last couple of years we've seen a transition from, well, if you want a vaccine, go get one, to if you don't get a vaccine, in some places they've already started doing this, where I think it was like 3 years ago, and was it Boston, where they quarantined a part of the city off and said if you don't get vaccinated by your own will, we're not going to force you. We're just going to point this gun at you, and we're not going to let you leave the house until you agree to get vaccinated. And it's all around us, Ira. I think we've come basically to the end of today's show. There's a couple of other news articles I've got up on the website. We'll get to them next week because I just wanted to mention this to you really quick. We've got a little under 10 minutes. This came from a National Geographic magazine that I saw. Did you get a chance to see the new National Geographic, maybe by any chance at all out somewhere?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so here's the new National Geographic, and just like everything we've talked about, Ira, just like the racial problem, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's vaccinations, or it's fluoride, or it's child trafficking networks, there's a little bit of truth to what opponents say, and let's protest and let's stand up for black rights. Let's not talk negatively about this or that. Like, I get it to a certain extent, but there's a point at which that is used as a defensive mechanism to cover up stuff that's happening and going on and being conducted by people who are in very high positions of power, who don't want that information to get out. And until they are out of those positions of power or they have died, the government in general won't even launch an inquiry into the investigation to see what the truth really was. So I can kind of understand what this National Geographic says. The problem that I have with it, Ira, is that it paints a very, very distorted and misinformed viewpoint of people like yourself and people like me. And here's what the National Geographic article says. It says National Geographic at the top. And then underneath of that, it says the war on science. And I agree, there is a little bit of a war on science. However, here's the war on science, Ira. Climate change does not exist, is what they say. That's part of the war on science. Evolution never happened. The moon landing was fake. Vaccinations can lead to autism, and genetically modified food is evil. Now, really quick, let me run down my thoughts, and then I'll give it over to you. They say climate change does not exist. If you say that, you're part of the war on science. You're waging a war on science, basically, is what they're saying. The problem that I have with this is that I don't buy into the government's version of what they call global warming, or what they had to now coin climate change. I don't buy into it because of the green programs, the more totalitarian, tyrannical steps they take to take control of people and your homes and your cars, all under the guise of green, installing this green technology for spying purposes and advertising and things like that. The problem is there is a little bit of climate change taking place, but it's not necessarily a direct result of our actions as human beings. And they make you think it's either not taking place, which means you're crazy, or it's fully taking place as fully significant as whatever the your favorite politician or your favorite scientist said it's happening full on. It's either one extreme or the other. It's never anywhere in the middle. They say evolution never happened. Now, see, I'm a person who can say I think humans were genetically engineered and modified. We have a creator in a sense, whether that's just Mother Nature or whether it was an ET species. But evolution, we have evolved over time. So again, it's not one extreme or the other. The moon landing was fake. I think that the moon landing, the one that we see, probably was faked. I mean, that's really what I believe. The problem is I don't think that we didn't necessarily go to the moon. That's what they say. Well, if you believe the moon landing was fake, well, you believe we didn't go to the moon. Well, no, that's not what I said. I think the photos and the videos were fake, but I think that we actually went to the moon. We just didn't see the real photographs or video. And see, people's minds can't deal with that shit because they have been programmed to believe it's either one of the extremes or the other. And the last two here are GMOs are evil. So GMOs are evil. That's because they're engineering food to literally change your DNA. Listen, there are ways to engineer food, I think, that could probably be really beneficial for people. The problem is we don't fully understand genetically modified foods. We don't understand the genetic modification process until each one of us get a pamphlet in the mail with the explanation of why it's being done. I don't think it should be even on the table for discussion, let alone be placed into your food without you knowing about it. And the last one, vaccinations can lead to autism. It's like it's a suggestion or a thought. Well, could they lead to autism? Well, no, it's a fact. How many people have had their children vaccinated and they've either developed autism or they've developed some type of rare blood or disorder? I know people personally. That doesn't necessarily mean that the vaccine was a direct cause of those neurological issues, but over time, a buildup of everything in the environment, a buildup of everything that your children watch and eat and drink, that, coupled with the vaccination, leads to those types of diseases. So a war on science? No, it's not a war on science, and it's not a war on religion. I'm tired of the two sides and the two extremes fighting. It's a war on ignorance, Ira. That's what I'm declaring a war on today. What about you?
You're absolutely right. You know, I'll touch into the vaccines with autism thing first because that's what I'm most passionate about. My son was impacted by a vaccine. He is severely autistic. I don't say necessarily that it was the vaccine itself that caused the issue, but it could be a combinant of different environmental factors that the vaccine was a key for. And that's one thing that I advocate is again, asking questions, trying to find the answers to this. So that one, I have talked about that one quite a bit on my show. If anybody wants to go into my archives at openeyesnetwork.com, you can listen to me discussing that kind of thing kind of ad nauseum. But as far as the moon landing is concerned, I'm right with you on that. I know that we did, but the thing that we saw may not have been the one. You know, we don't know. We don't know because we weren't there, right? That's the way that you have to look at it. So I don't necessarily say that, no, we never went to the moon, but there are questions as to whether or not what we saw actually was the reality. I think that there were actually quite a few other things that were going on in the background that we just don't know about. There's been enough evidence to show that there's been secret space programs going on for many years now, including during that time period. As far as climate change is concerned, let me just say this. A few days ago, I believe it was NASA came out on spaceweather.com, and they were talking about the sun right now is at an extreme minimum. It is at the lowest point that they've ever basically recorded it, and that we are probably entering into a new ice age. So instead of it being the man-made anthropogenic thing, which they've actually now said that we have entered that era now. We've left the previous one. We're now entering into the anthropogenic era. Instead of it being man-made, it's not your SUVs driving down the road and it's not the cows farting that are causing the problems. It's the sun, which people just they refuse to take a look at the big ball of gas up there that is controlling everything in the solar system and everywhere around for the light year around. That's what's causing the issue. It has been having so many issues that people just don't pay attention to.
They've got such a problem with that sun, don't they? You know, it's they can't acknowledge that the sun's there and could be, I don't know, a cause of partially a cause of the environment changing. Who knew? But they've got no problem in acknowledging the sun as a negative thing when it comes to don't go out in the sun. You could get skin cancer.
Yes.
But and it's funny now that I'm even thinking about it because it even ties in with religion. These people that are very religious and they have these very rigid dogmatic belief systems in a particular savior God. They don't realize that those savior gods, like we talked about with Robert Sullivan, they come from the same line and the same stories, and we see it in movies today. Every story we hear, it's the same story about death and resurrection and someone coming to save mankind. It's the same exact thing over and over again, and the people that want the truth don't just look up at the sky and say, look, there's the truth, there's the sun, there's the God right there. So it's that way with religion, it's that way with science, it's that way with politics. It's just sometimes the answer is right there, and what ought to be best for us, we demonize, and what is really bad for us, we put up on a pedestal. Isn't that just the epitome of how our society has been structured?
Yes, exactly. It's the world of opposites, like I said earlier. The education system doesn't educate, it indoctrinates. The justice system is not just. It is there for the corporate entities to gain more money. It really is. The medical system is not there to heal. It's there to cause harm, to allow its self-perpetuating profit margins to grow ever bigger. On and on and on. It really is this world of opposites, and that's what we're dealing with. And that's the truth that people just don't want to face.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you what, it's just like that Michael Elner quote, doctors destroy health, religions destroy spirituality, lawyers destroy justice, and so on and so forth. It's just so true. Everything is backwards. Everything is the opposite. It's like what's it called? All of our comic book fans are going to really get on me about this, but Superman. And what's the opposite world? Isn't it like Bizarro World or something?
Yeah, Bizarro World.
That's what it's like living in. It's like Bizarro World. That's where we're from, and the real reality is happening somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. It really does make you wonder if we're just stuck in a matrix somewhere, you know?
It does, absolutely. Well, Ira, I really appreciate you joining me on the show for today. I'm going to play this little bit of a sound here, clip from, what is this here? I got Night Call by Him. I'm going to get that going in the background real quick. Anything else you'd like to add where the listeners can catch your show? I know it's on L&M, right?
Yeah, we're on the Late Night in the Midlands network. We play on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm also on Thursdays with my brother. We have a show called Brothers at Arms. It's actually going to be starting, it started on March 12th. So that's an interesting show because we sort of, in this situation like you and I, having a conversation together about just the issues of the day, and it's a really interesting show. Both of us kind of come at things from an opposite angle, so
that's good. It's
very entertaining to get the middle ground, basically.
That's how you get the entertainment value out of it, as well as the information that's important to discuss.
You got it. Glean that little bit of consciousness every bit that you can.
For sure, Ira. Well, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you later. This is The Secret Teachings. I'm your host, Ryan Gable. The website, www.thesecretteachings.info. That's www.thesecretteachings.info. Ira's information is linked up both at thesecretteachings.info and latenightinthemidlands.com. We'll be back next week right here on The Secret Teachings. If you missed today's show, don't forget we had Robert Sullivan, the fourth author of Cinema Symbolism, on in the first part. We'll be back next week to talk about my cross-country trip, as well as Area 51 S4 S2 in Nevada, Nellis Air Force Base. We'll also be talking about some current events next week as well. Stay tuned, and you can email me at rdgable@yahoo.com. That's rdgable@yahoo.com. We'll be back. Stay tuned.